Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Tuesday, May 21st, 2013 meeting of the Urban Village Development Commission. We have a full agenda tonight, and looking forward to getting into the discussion about Issaquah Terrace. Before we do, and before we go into the meeting minutes from the last meeting, I'd like to bring Lucy to the floor to talk about a couple of introductions.
So you'll notice a new face. It's Tim Eves, who's our newest alternate commission member, and Chantal Stevens, who is a new commissioner. Chantal is not here this evening. She's out of town on a business trip. I'd like to give Tim a minute to introduce himself, say a little bit about like what neighborhood you're from, and what attracted you to the UVDC, maybe. You have to push the button.
Well,
a little red light will turn on.
Well, there it is. Okay. My name is Tim Eves. I'm a resident of the South Cove neighborhood. I've been in that house since I came to the state of Washington 28 years ago. I've been a resident of the city of Issaquah within the boundaries for about the last 7 or 8 years whenever South Cove was annexed, and for 18, 19 years I've been a small business owner, and I've been spending most all of my time being a small business owner, working sun up to sundown, commuting to Linwood for my job. And as time has gone on, I've decided to do some other things with my life, and this was an opportunity that came up when they were having the applications for these commissions. I looked around and I thought that this was the kind of thing that I liked, because I remember Issaquah when there was a skyport over where Costco used to be. And I've seen a lot of development go on over the years, and I like the city of Issaquah. I have loved it here for 28 years, and I want to continue to love it as time goes on, and I want to have a hand in making it be the kind of place that I'd like to live and my kids like to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I just want to point out that tonight we will open nominations for chair and vice chair of the commission. I mention that now because we'll discuss this at the end of the meeting, so you should be thinking about who you might want to nominate, or if you'd like to nominate yourself. We will not vote until the next meeting, so that there will be some time, for instance, if Chantal wanted to run or someone wanted to nominate her, and just for people to consider it, since we didn't give you much warning.
All right, thank you, Lucy, and welcome, Tim. Welcome, Chantal. We're looking forward to seeing you here at the next meeting. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the first agenda item. That's meeting minutes from the April 2nd, 2013 meeting. I was not here for that meeting, but I did go through the meeting minutes and currently cannot find them. Did anybody have any questions, concerns, edits on that set of meeting minutes? Michael, did you have something?
Not on the minutes, but I just wanted to update some of the contact information that the city has on file for everyone. So.
Actually, great idea. I have an update as well. Why don't we send one sheet? I'll send my sheet around, and we'll use this as the master for master updates. Thank you for bringing that up. So, Lucy, can we give that to, or Karen, can we give that to you at the end here? Okay. So we'll go ahead and do that. Thank you. Any comments on the meeting minutes from April 2nd? Okay, so I have a motion to accept those minutes.
Oh, I move to accept the minutes from the, I don't have the date in front of me, Carl, how dare you, April 2nd meeting of the UVDC.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. We have a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. Great. It's passed. Let's go ahead and move on to the, we're going to start with Lucy, who's giving us a light show right now. She's going to start us off with the Issaquah Terrace site development permit.
So we're going to mix things up a little bit and let the applicant do their presentation first. And then Jerry Lind, senior planner, will give the staff presentation.
Great. Thank you.
I turn it over to Richard Rawlings. Is it red?
Here it is. Hi, my name is Richard Rawlings. I'm with Polygon Northwest Company. Our address is 11624 Southeast 5th Street in Bellevue, and the zip code there is 98005. Actually, it's also Suite 200 on that. You know, initially, or in the past year, what Lucy and I have talked about with respect to tonight's presentation was that we would kind of, as the developer builder, give you kind of our flavor and our vision of what we were going to propose for the site, rather than kind of extensive details, which I think are contained in the staff report. And so, if you're kind of wondering about what's the quantity to this or the setback of that and so forth, I think Lucy will be able, and Jerry, to address that. So just quickly, I'm sure a lot of you know, but we've been around at Polygon Northwest in Puget Sound for over 20 years. Closed over 15,000 homes. Those are single-family townhomes, sort of the multi-family stack plats, as well as some rental communities. And that's really been wide-ranging from Everett, Lake Stevens, all the way down to Puyallup and beyond, and also now more recently here, Issaquah and North Bend. We currently have a project in the Highlands, Forest Ridge, which is about 85, 86 single-family homes, and that's kind of probably in 3/4 of the way through being constructed, and we invite you to go see that, of course. And coming up over the next months, we'll be working on 2 additional townhome projects in the Highlands as well. So one of those is right central to the downtown core, what we call blocks 21 and 22, which is kind of right across from the new sporting goods store. So that'll be kind of an interesting project. The proposal for this parcel, which is parcels, I think, A1 and A2 of the Lakeside Urban Village, is strictly residential in this case. There was an allowance for a component of other mixed-use type opportunities, but we've chosen to go with strictly residential. It substantially will be 268 stacked flats in a 3- and 4-story, 20 to 24 unit building. And then there's a 30-unit townhome component that's in the panhandle of the property, which you kind of see horizontally here. This is oriented north-south. So,
Can I pause you for just a sec? Could
Yeah.
we have you speak into the mic a little bit? We're having
sorry.
trouble hearing you back here.
Yep.
Thank you.
No, it's not the tallest mic.
Uh-oh, yeah. So, when Lucy asked us to kind of speak about our vision, I think pretty early on in working with Jerry and Lucy and the city, we kind of developed a vision that was a little bit different and not without some prodding by the city. And what I mean by that is, we have kind of a standard suburban template for how you would develop this kind of project, and it'd be very vehicle-oriented. And so we worked with the city and the staff to agree that, we have a real opportunity here to go really strongly, really significantly to more of a pedestrian-oriented arrangement on the site. And so our concept to achieve that is really to make something that looks more like a campus. Not necessarily the University of Washington, but taking some of the cues of, people want to get from one place to the other, and, a direct, nice, aesthetic route is good, and that is not necessarily always parallel to where the car is going. And so that was kind of the main overriding theme for how we wanted to arrange and work on the site. So with that, all the buildings in the main body of the community, they front on some form of significant pedestrian active area or circulation route or other pedestrian sort of oriented amenity. And we have kind of 2, I guess, broad or 2 substantial circulation routes. We've got will the cursor be seen?
Yeah.
If I do that? Can you see the cursor? Yeah, okay. So running roughly north-south through the spine and the central part of the site, what we're talking about here is really a mall kind of development. So you've got buildings fronting this long linear space, set back off the fronts of those buildings are walkways that are 10, potentially 12 feet wide, and then they are flanking along central green space. And then reinforcing that would be colonnades of trees. And so we would imagine or envision having pairs of trees marching down each side of this central north-south activity area. And so it's kind of literally like a mall, like you might essentially envision from Washington, D.C. or a campus atmosphere. And then not quite at the same scale, but going east-west through the site, there is a series of connecting pathways that are, again, oversized, sort of in the 8 to 10 foot type width, kind of, you know, making those the two significant routes, and then off of those would be other pathways taking you to different activity areas. The kinds of things that the pathways are taking you to, other than your residence, would be, we have a pool and patio, pool patio slash barbecue area that's somewhat central in the north end of the site. We have a community center in the northwest corner of the site, and that would include an activity, not an activity room so much as a living room where you have a little kitchenette. You could have a TV, so it's kind of, you could rent it for the Super Bowl party, or you could have a birthday party. And it has an exercise room, and then it has some very small sort of business type facility. So if you needed a printer or fax machine or something like that, you'd have access to that. In the south part of the site, excuse me, this part of the site is pretty significantly below Highlands Drive, below kind of the alley that comes out from behind the YMCA, and below the large slope and existing wall that separates the community from the existing residences to the east. And so that corner is a little bit dark, but that's where we would program the dog run. So it would be a fenced area where you could take your house friend and go for a walk there. And I think that's similar in keeping with kind of what was going on over at the Devco site on the other end of the Highlands. Near that would be also kind of in this area of the site would be a pea patch. So I mean, you all know what those are like. So it would have enclosed shed type facilities. You could have rakes, hoses, all the kinds of things you might need to do to really make it useful rather than just token. So what we have looked at here recently in the last couple of days are a lot of letters that the city has received. Not a lot, but there's probably 8 or 10 letters that really focus on one aspect of the project pretty directly, and that's the Panhandle, and how do the townhomes that are proposed in the Panhandle relate to the existing single-family homes there. And so I wanted, without taking a lot of time, just kind of address what that relationship is, to kind of get that in what I consider to be get that cleared up. There will be, at least under the proposal, along this property line and this property line for the townhome project, a 10-foot wall, essentially 10 foot, in some cases 12, but mostly 10. That wall will support our grading of our Panhandle site below the existing residences. So what that means is the 2-story elevation of our townhome that's proposed against that property line will start 10 feet lower than the adjacent residences. Our buildings are on par, on scale and bulk and sort of height with what the adjacent residences are, but we will be starting essentially 10 feet lower. So we would expect that all of our roof lines are going to be on the magnitude of 10 feet lower than their roof lines. Now that's going to vary, but that's kind of the arrangement that would occur there. The homes that are up adjacent to us are a combination of single-family homes and also some duplex homes. Our 4-unit module of townhome is very similar in height, length, and width to the duplex homes that are there. And so we kind of feel like they're not being, out of keeping with what has been built in the adjacent neighborhood to date. Setback is a question, and the setback varies. The minimum, I believe, is 4 feet from that adjacent community. We're proposing basically a minimum about of 11 feet, but it varies from 11 to 14. There are some areas where it's 20. But it would be, again, if we look at, there aren't footprints on this plan, but if we were to look at where the back walls and decks of some of these homes are and into this corner, there are garages that have been constructed to what looks like to be within 5 or 7 feet of our property line. We're proposing that our buildings would be set back more in the order of 11 to 20 feet. So I wanted to make sure that was clear. And, that's really, I guess, the presentation in terms of what we had wanted to discuss in terms of kind of the vision and what it kind of feels like. But knowing that the panhandle is an issue or a question, we want to be sure we get that out there.
Great. Thanks very much, Richard. So, Commission, if you guys don't mind, I think I'd like to hear the staff report and get into that before we get into too many questions. But, Mr. Rawlings, if you don't mind, we'd like to bring you back up for questions as they come up. Okay? Jerry, are you going to take us through this?
Yes.
All right. Jerry's first time with our commission, so welcome.
Hello, Commission members. I've been with the city for a number of years, but it's my first opportunity to work with the Urban Village Commission. I've generally been working with the commission that works in the Valley, but I've certainly worked with Polygon on a number of projects over the years, too. This is the vicinity map of the site. It's kind of it's a two-piece property. It's got a large triangular piece and then a little peninsula one that Richard was just speaking about. But the Issaquah Highlands project does surround the site on 3 sides, to the east, to the south, and to the west. And then to the north is unincorporated King County. The proposal is for 268 stacked apartments. This is in neighborhood A1, which is the western part of the site. There's also 30 houses in neighborhood A2. This total site is 13.5 acres. And the project, and this is an emphasis, it's designed to be garden style with significant pedestrian orientation. Rather than depending so much on the vehicle, we really want to create a neighborhood which uses walkways, bicycles as a means of travel versus the vehicle. And I think you'll see that in these green spaces that are provided. This comes directly out of the development agreement. The development agreement went through environmental review and was approved by the City Council this past late January. Lakeside has the upper portion, which is A1 and A2 that we're going to speak about this evening. The other neighborhoods you see in the other colors are the lower portions of Lakeside, which will be developed in years to come. They're still extracting gravel and sand from those neighborhoods. The upper neighborhood has already been extracted of all the gravels, and if you've driven by it in the last few years, you've noticed that it's been pretty much an open pit. There's been a large pond of water, and they're currently getting this all filled in place for this project. This is an aerial photo. It's not the most recent one, but you can get the idea of the Issaquah Highlands and the single-family neighborhood to the right. To the south, which is just off the yellow line, is the YWCA multifamily project. To the to the west is the park and ride lot, and then up north are large lots within King County. These are some fairly recent photos I took on Monday this week. There was a break in good weather, but I wanted to show you something fairly recent. And this is taken along, these first few pictures are taken along Highlands Drive, looking up towards the project. This is viewing northeast, and you can see the homes at the top. I've had a number of conversations with these folks that live on that ridge line. This is viewing a little bit further, also in the southeast direction. And you can see the trucks in the middle of the picture with their activities loading and unloading the fill material of that site. Behind that is a fairly large green space that is in place now. It's full of meadow grasses and beautiful spring flowers blooming right now. That's going to be a permanent green space, and with this project, the hope is to replant that in more substantial trees and shrubs. Again, here's the view looking east, and that's a car wash, truck wash, I should say, right in the middle of the photograph to keep our streets clean. This is the area that is facing towards the YWCA, and you'll see that's the pedestrian bridge that connects that facility to the park and ride lot across the street over Highlands Drive. That's a fairly tall retaining wall you see in the middle of the picture, too. This is the area that Richard was just speaking about. That would be for the dog run at the base, and so this will be kind of cleaned up. I was at the top of the hill. I spoke to some neighbors that lived at the top, and I wanted to see what they saw. And so I took some pictures from the top of some of those home sites, and this is kind of viewing the northwest, so you get the overall picture of the site. Very vegetated in the background, and to the left of this photograph would be the Highlands Drive. And again, as you're looking further north from the same hillside, that's the grassy hillside I mentioned that's in the wildflowers today. A number of residents have been talking about the elevations. What are they going to see? As Richard mentioned, the Panhandle has been the area that's had the most concern with the neighbors. I've placed in red the elevation. These are spot elevations, as the site will be. The residents along this ridge here and up through this point too have had the most. These residents here have had the most to say, as well as up here too, and that's one of the letters I just gave you this evening. These are all spot elevations that shows what the finished grades of the site will be. The development agreement also allows the site to be graded plus or minus 10 feet too. They feel fairly secure that these are going to be close to the grades that will be in place. This 480 is at the top of the bank, not at the lower portion, so there's about a 30-foot change when you look at the base as you go up the hill, and then when you get to the finished floor of these houses up here, so there's quite a bit of grade change. The lowest of the elevations are at the entranceway off of Highlands Drive, and right through here on the northern and western sides, but it is fairly steep as you go up to the Panhandle. There's two townhomes up here at about approximately the 540-foot elevation. So those will have the greatest impact to the adjacent neighbors. This is the site plan, neighborhood A1 and A2. There are 12 apartment complexes within neighborhood A1 to the west. That's the large triangular space. There's also a clubhouse near the entrance. There's a number of open parking lots throughout the A1 neighborhood, and some of those open lots also have carports in it to break up those spaces. Neighborhood A2 is developed solely as townhouses, and those are 3-story townhouses. The neighborhood A1 are all 4-story flats as apartments. This is the rendition again. You can see there is quite a bit of green space. Most of it here in the center, which is the main pedestrian area for the complex. And as Richard mentioned, there's a series of alleys throughout this complex, so that the garages, which are below all the apartments, they'll all be fronting the alleys, so that the front doors will front patios, open spaces, landscaping, fenced courtyards in front, and so they'll have really nice views. The main entrance is over here at the west, and that's going to be a new signalized type entrance too, and it's got access in and out from that site, and there's a secondary point of access to the site a little further south. That's got a little bit more limitation as right in, right out, because it is a one-way street on Highlands Drive. The allowed density, this is by the development agreement, called for 100 to 325 units maximum within the neighborhood A1. They're proposing 268 units, and they're all stacked type units. Neighborhood A2 was limited to 50 units, and they've proposed 30, all as townhouses. The development standards, again, this is what the development agreement required: a setback of 10 feet to the north. I guess I showed that to you a moment ago, but that's in the neighborhood to the left side, and there are no other setbacks to that neighborhood. The central part of that site, they could have built 7 stories, but they are all 4 stories in height. And the way they're taking advantage of the topography, you'll see maybe 3 stories on one side, 4 stories on the other side, with the garage entrance side off the alleys. The northern part of the site, which abuts King County Residential, is limited to 4 stories, and they're in compliance with that. Neighborhood A2 is a very tight peninsula on the project site. The setbacks are 10 feet to the north, and there's some steep hillsides there too, so they're in compliance with that. 4 feet to the south and east, and Richard mentioned that the setbacks are 11 to about 15 feet, maybe a little bit more on those sides, plus they also have decks on the buildings too. They're proposed as 3 stories, and that is the maximum they can achieve on that site. Required parking is 1 per unit, and they meet that at the 298. There are about 44 stalls over the minimum. They could have up to 569, and they're at 342. So they're somewhat in the middle. In addition to that parking, they do have aprons in front of those apartments, and if they are at least 18 feet in length, they could also park there as additional parking, but that would not be required parking for this project. The key point is pedestrian orientation and usability on this site. You'll see this is directly from the development agreement. You'll see that they have major links that run north and south through the site, connecting neighborhoods A1 and A2, and possibly a link up to the Issaquah Highlands. Here, there is a little bit of topography change there that would take a staircase to get up to that neighborhood, as well as research and permission, make sure there would be no restrictions to access to that street up there. Connections down at the base would be to sidewalks, new sidewalks along Highlands Drive, as well as to the park and ride facility across the street, and to the overpass on the site. Other circulations are directly through the site itself. This shows the pedestrian connectivity. Now, this is one site, unlike the Highlands, which is a series of blocks. Generally, a block you will keep at about 200 feet maximum to make it pedestrian friendly, which is what this site's doing. They're about 180 to 200 feet apart when you look at the way the connections are, the breaks are between the buildings and the walkways. So I've shown that both vertically and horizontally in this slide. Those red lines represents the main pedestrian corridors in the site. Pedestrian connections. There's 2 types of connections in this site, this garden style project. There's the standard walks, which the development agreement requires to be 6 feet wide. And that's being provided. Again, it shows a possible connection to the east into the Issaquah Highlands, as well as down at the far southwest, a connection to the park and ride facility too. The dashed lines, which is forming a figure T, that's the main spine, pedestrian spine in the complex. That's about 10 feet in width. And it pretty much starts over at the clubhouse near the entrance, the swimming pool, and there's quite a few pedestrian amenities in this region. And then it goes over eastward where it intersects with the main green space of the project. And there's several pedestrian amenities in that. The community spaces which the pedestrian links go to, of course, is the clubhouse and the seating area around it. The kiosk that's in front of the main entrance. The pool area, which is an outdoor pool with jacuzzi, some seating areas that are covered spaces. This is the large green for kind of a boulevard look with trees on both sides, and you can play sport games in that space. There are some seating areas as you go further south, barbecue areas, a children's tot lot right here, and in your packet you'll see some examples of the children's play equipment that's been proposed within that space, and of course seating areas for the parents there too. And then as you go further south is a pea patch area. So there's some raised beds for blueberries and assorted vegetables, and it's surrounded even by a number of fruit trees, and there's a shed there where you can keep all your garden equipment, so it should be really pleasant. Going further south is the dog area. Hopefully it won't be too noisy for the surrounding neighbors, but it does have high walls to buffer the noises in that respect. There's also a few elevated areas too for viewing opportunities. Up here at the Panhandle, it's got the most limited pedestrian amenities to it, but it does have a nice seating area here on granite rocks where you enter that neighborhood, as well as by roadway A2. I've clipped on a few examples of these community spaces, and you see them in fairly good detail on the landscaping plans, the clubhouse, which maybe it's going to take some tweaking of the orientation. It seems to orient more towards the cars, the parking lot, versus the pedestrian and the main entrance to the site. Certainly the pool here, hopefully there'll be some opportunities to use the outdoor pool, but it's also got some covered areas for the poor weather we often get. The pea patch area is a very busy area down here. It's got a lot of things going on, but it's got good circulation to get to those areas. And then, of course, the large dog park, and there's plenty of sitting opportunities there too for the residents. The major road connections are shown on this slide, which is in the red. Again, you have the main entrance to the north and secondary to the south, and these others are just internal, which ends at a T intersection in neighborhood A2. That road has a few issues that will need to be resolved with the construction permits. It's considered a character street, which is this one right here. It's an asphalt street, but it's going to have to be slightly a little bit wider. It's going to have a different kind of surfacing other than asphalt, perhaps some kind of concrete or other types of paving materials to make it that character street. The alleyways are where your garages will be entering. Those aren't quite as fancy, but they do have some street trees in those areas too to kind of shade and add a little bit of greenery. The neighborhood streets will have more of the larger boulevard type trees, and there are a number of community connectors throughout the complex. I did want to make note also on the pedestrian connection here. The drawing you have actually shows the sidewalk kind of curving around the building. That's not too pedestrian friendly. We'd like to see that building shifted a little bit further south, or maybe it could go 15 feet, and it'd make a more even, more direct way for the pedestrians to walk to, and keep them a little further away from the carports. These are typical elevations of the apartment buildings. As I mentioned, they're 4 stories. 4 stories from one side, maybe 3 stories from the higher side of the elevation. And you can see they've all got the garages in front. They're single car type garages and varied architecture. The townhouses are stepped as the property goes up eastward. It does not work quite as well as the other units. When you would drive by it now, you would see mostly garage doors at the street level, and we'd like to see that fixed. Some of those double-car garages could be placed with single-car garage doors. The second floor overhang over the garage could be increased. Maybe it could be a deck, or it could be more of a cantilever part of the unit. The entryways could be accentuated a little bit more too, to make them a little bit more friendly too, but we'd want to see that fixed a little bit more. There's not too much in your packet on the architecture itself, but it has been approved by the Architectural Review Committee and just recently, so that did not make your packets. And this is fairly new section too. We've had a number of comments from the neighbors that live in the Issaquah Highlands, and of course their concern is what will they see, because the buildings are fairly close. The development agreement allowed them to be as close as 4 feet. As Richard Relling said, those buildings will be set down about 10 feet lower, so they will see the second and third floors of those units. The Architectural Review Committee did approve this project on May 14th, and so they're pleased with it. So that's fairly recent. So again, it's to promote a walkable atmosphere, garden-style apartments. Some of the roadways will need some tweaking. But overall, I think the project works fairly nice, and it's a pretty big transformation over what you see there today with the open pit that's slowly being built up. Some of the neighbors have asked about, well, the timing on this too. We sent out over 200 mailings to the neighbors, both as a notice of application and also as a notice for this meeting. We've received about a dozen letters from the public. You've got them in your staff reports, as well as some that came after 5 o'clock today, so it's really hot off the press. For the most part, neighbors have been concerned mostly with those properties along the panhandle. What will they see? Concerns about the garbage dumpsters. Are they screened? Fences at the northwest corner of the site in neighborhood A1. They're concerned about that too. So I think we've covered that in our conditions of the building. Again, one of the neighbors was up here wanting to see some fencing through here. Neighbors on this road are concerned what they'll see to the north. These neighbors here are concerned about what they'll see to the west. Neighbors down here were concerned about the garbage dumpsters too. There's a few of them around the property, and one of them are asking to be relocated further westward to better serve the apartments, but we'd expect them to aesthetically be matching the buildings architecturally and be covered and be animal proof too. This triangle up here, as you notice, is the only area that doesn't have any buildings in it, because that's a steep slope area too. And so there's retaining walls there, and we actually did approve this last May 10th, an adjustment to the buffers, to the setbacks to those steep slopes. Instead of having a 50-foot buffer with a critical area study, it was determined that a 10-foot buffer would be okay, plus a 15-foot building setback. So that area is one area that will stay as green space. It pretty much slopes downwards, so that's the way the topography works in that area. There's a number of conditions in the staff report, 41 to be exact, and some of those 41 conditions actually have several parts to them too. And I wanted to go over those conditions, at least the ones that are unique to this site. Some of them are standard conditions that we use on most of our projects, and you've seen them before. The condition starts on page 35 of your staff report. And I know there's some audience members here too. There's extra copies, I should have said, of the plans on the table. So feel free to grab a copy too. And if you want to speak this evening, also sign in on the sheet up on the table too. We'll take you up for public comment whether you speak or not, or sign the sheet or not, but feel free to grab a copy of those plans. On the conditions 1, 2, and 3, those are standard conditions, so I won't go over those. Condition 4, though, says prior to issuance of the first implementing land use permit, example, the Urban Village Development Commission issuance of a notice of decision, but subsequent to a vote taken to approve, if made, the project administrator shall pay all gifts, SEPA mitigations, and so forth, identified in the development agreement, as well as provide the city with a plan to meet affordable housing. That's in the development agreement, and this is the very first implementing land use permit. It's not the building permit, but the site development permit. Condition 5, the applicant shall monitor and remove with adjacent homeowners' permission trees that fall or become hazardous falling tree removal along the northern property line for a period of 3 years subsequent to the logging of the applicant's property. And that northern side is fairly dense with trees, as you saw in that aerial photo. Number 6 is a fairly important one, and that has to do with the carports. There is an example of the carports in the staff report as one of the attachments, which we don't feel is in keeping with the rest of the complex. They're fairly plain, you might say. Flat roofs on support posts, and it's not very pedestrian friendly as you walk by these things. And we'd certainly like to see architecturally these things change, some landscaping, other elements to fix them up somewhat. But the condition reads, the carport shall be designed as pedestrian-friendly elements that positively contribute to the adjacent pedestrian circulation elements and appropriately terminate vistas. This would include designing the side of the carports adjacent to pedestrians with elements that screen the vehicles and parking and add interest to humanize the structures and attractively terminate vistas to them. Extending the roof of the carport to provide weather protection to the pedestrians should also be encouraged. So we feel there needs to be a little bit more work in that area. Number 7 condition is the primary pedestrian path north of building 4 that must be designed in a pedestrian-friendly manner by making it direct and convenient, such as shifting the building to the south. And I showed that with a pointer a moment ago. And we feel there's space where that can be accomplished. Number 8 is a standard condition. Number 9 is relocate the waste enclosure near the clubhouse so that it doesn't terminate in axial view and is more serviceable. We don't have permission yet from the company that will do the picking up of the refuse there and the recycling elements, but we'll want to make sure that they can also get to it. Number 10 is redesign the townhomes to be consistent with the guidelines and minimize the garage's presence. This would entail bringing occupied space in front of, including the front doors, and overhanging the garages, including using single garage doors, even for side-by-side garages, separate distinct walkways to each home entry. And again, that was in the handout we have here. And I would also want to note, too, that while we did talk about sidewalk circulation, it's going to have to be improved for these 2 northern ones as well, too. There's no link there except using the street. There's space for that because the T is a little bit wider, the hammerhead, than it needs to be, so I'm sure that can be accomplished. Number 11 is select wall styles must be consistent with the area which they will be used. Rockeries and natural or hidden areas, MSC or cast in place in the developed areas. This would necessitate change to some wall types, such as visible rockeries, walls adjacent to pedestrian facilities, and places where people congregate must be reduced to about 4 feet. Taller walls set away from pedestrian areas that people are using will be softened with landscaping, including trees and vines. Walls on the northern property will be terraced or employ other techniques to minimize the impact on adjacent properties. Fall protection, this is for pedestrians using those walkways, will be required where there is a 2.5-foot drop. And there's quite a few retaining walls, if you've noticed on the plans. The landscaping plans probably illustrate it the best. Conditions 12 and 13 are standard conditions. 14 is a little bit more unique to the site again. They'll want to work with the adjacent property owners in Division 2 to determine if a trail connection can be provided between the two urban villages. Again, that's the easternmost terminus of the site. Number 15, the proposed intersection shall be designed to maximize pedestrian safety and prioritize pedestrians.
I'm sorry, can we clarify on that last statement? Which intersection are we referring to?
We have several intersections. You have intersections here on the streets. You have street intersections within the complex too. We want to make all these safe, the way the sidewalks work.
So are we stating here that proposed intersections, plural, covering all of them, or are we talking about a specific one in this condition?
All of them.
Okay, so let's make that.
Actually, I think if you look at the second paragraph of that condition, Jerry, it may be...
As the alternate? This is the primary entrance right here.
Okay, so let's just make this one more clear.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
As an alternate, if the at-grade intersection cannot be built, the applicant shall provide a direct connection to the existing pedestrian bridge. And this is kind of a very unique area. And you do have a blow-up of this area too within your packet also. But we want to make sure all the intersections are safe too. Number 16 is Phase 1 of Highlands Drive intersection shall include a southern crosswalk that is pedestrian friendly. Number 17 is dedication of the Highlands Drive right-of-way as shown in the development agreement, that's Exhibit D4 of the development agreement, shall occur with acceptance of the sidewalk along Highlands Drive as shown and required by Development Agreement Exhibit D1. That's number 9. Number 18 is with tree wells. That's a standard comment on all our projects, the sizing of it. Number 19 and 20 are unique to this project. Number 19 states, submit a modification to allow carports to substitute for parking lot landscape and trees. This must be submitted and approved prior to other permits for construction being submitted, except grading. If this modification is not approved or where carports or other acceptable alternatives are not provided, landscape and trees to meet the standards must be provided. And our surface parking lots does require interior landscaping of those lots, and it's we haven't bought into the carport design yet, but with the carports and the open spaces now, landscaping is hard to achieve the way it's designed. So we're going to have to study that a little further and see if we can accept the carports where they're located. Number 20 is a large condition, where large retaining walls are provided. Plans to provide scale to the wall and soften its appearance without overwhelming pedestrians or significant blocking light should be provided. If the applicant is unable to obtain a grading and landscaping easement for off-site landscape and grading, the applicant must submit a modification to this permit for administrative review and approval, identifying how these changes have impacted the proposal and how a modification will comply with the intent of approval obtained through the Urban Village Development Commission, as well as the development agreement. And again, we're referring to this off-site area above the retaining wall here to the east. The walls along there are fairly large, and even while the landscaping plans you'll know have identified conceptually how these walls will be landscaped, some of the spaces are fairly tight, and maybe vines will further soften some of those larger walls too, where space is not available for the more broader trees. Conditions 21 through 26 are standard conditions, so we won't go over those. 27 and 28 and 29 also on the next page.
Quick question.
Yes.
Point of clarity in regards to item number 24. What is a type A loading space? Is that defined somewhere in the documentation?
It is. That's part of the parking regulations of the development agreement. The commercial as well as residential does require loading spaces for, say, you have moving trucks that come to the project. Would expect to see one of those spaces that are a little bit larger than your typical stall. The dimensions, I could grab it for you if you need to. We'd like to see at least one of those stalls provided near the clubhouse, and another one maybe more centrally located into the site. But you'll have deliveries, you'll have moving vans coming and going. This gives them a sufficient space to park without being within the roadways themselves.
Okay. Thank you.
The plan currently doesn't show that. Number 30 is off-site water supply connection to the 8-inch main to the east may be undersized, and the applicant must provide proof through hydraulic analysis that the connection can meet city standards for maximum velocity during a fire flow. In the event that the velocity standard is exceeded, the 8-inch main must be upgraded by the applicant in order to comply with city standards. This condition will be enforced during the utility permit review. 31, the applicant does not show a looped water system around Road E and Road C, and an additional main must be added to complete the loop. This condition, like the last one, will be enforced during the utility permit review. Conditions 32 and 33 are standard conditions, so I won't go over those. 34, though, is prior to issuance of the utility permits for any projects that creates impervious surfaces, the applicant shall obtain a franchise agreement for any stormwater facilities that are located in the right-of-way, and an easement for any stormwater facilities that are located on city property. In the absence of these instruments, all stormwater facilities shall be located on property owned by the applicant. This condition will be enforced during utility permit review. 35 is a standard permit. Number 36 and 37 are unique to this site. 36 is a minimum of 3 required elements of the design innovation shall be implemented and shall be shown with the building permit applications. With the first permit construction of this project, if approved, the city and the applicant shall commence regular, example, bi-weekly meetings with the purpose of identifying a mutually satisfactory list of sustainability innovations consistent with the goals and budget and so forth. And this is listed in Appendix O of the development agreement. So there's several examples there that they can choose from. Number 37 is the location of the waste enclosure near Building 12 shall be moved further westward to better serve the residents of Building 6. For instance, the dumpster could be relocated within the parking area of Road B. Enclosures located in dead-end, double-loaded parking lots may need to be relocated to be served. Where waste containers will be rolled out grades may be no more than 3%. Additional review by Development Services Department staff and Cleanscapes is necessary. And Cleanscapes is the company that will be approving those. That dumpster is, that location, it pretty much overlaps a number by service-wise the townhomes. Now the townhome area will not have dumpsters. They all will have their recycling, garbage bins within their own garages. The rest of the complex will be in the dumpsters, and there's a number of them throughout the complex. And we've measured it to make sure that they're within walking distance to be user-friendly again, too, for the residents. Number 38, place service loading and waste enclosures within buildings or lidded over within courtyards. When this is not possible, applicants are encouraged to roof them to reduce their presence from above and reduce wildlife access. And we did have a neighbor that was concerned about this with a lot of crows that were flying. And again, they don't want the view looking down onto these open dumpsters. So it's really going to be important that they be screened. Not only the dumpsters, but also any HVAC that is on the rooftops of the buildings too. Number 39 and 40 are standard conditions. And 41, the final condition, that has several parts. We worked with our police department on that for safety. And it reads, the proposed pedestrian crossing shall be located at the intersection of the Park and Ride driveway with Highlands Drive and shall be designed to maximize pedestrian safety by including multiple clues to alert drivers to the presence and priority of pedestrians in the crosswalk, including the following. And we've listed A through F here for pedestrian safety. A new intersection signal at the nexus of Highlands Drive and the YWCA driveway, Park and Ride driveway that controls pedestrians through driveway traffic. B, the pedestrian component of the signal shall be activated via pedestrian push buttons and be coordinated with the adjacent signal at High Street and 9th Avenue so that a walk signal is coincident with a red light in the northbound through direction. And again, this is where the roads are one-way, Highlands Drive northbound, 9th Avenue one-way southbound. C, the coordinated pedestrian signal shall be timed so that the platoon of cars in the northbound through direction clears the pedestrian crossing before activation. D, advanced signage for vehicles that provides an alert for the pedestrian signal. E, signage for crossing pedestrians that discourage free crossing. So we don't want to see the jaywalking there. F is special pavement markings that signal the presence of the sidewalk. And we would see that throughout the whole complex too, where sidewalks would have a different material than the typical asphalt roadways. So A through F we would see to further provide safety for crossings over to the Park and Ride facility and to those sidewalks that will eventually lead further southward to the new commercial area that's currently under construction. And I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. All right, Commission, is there anything else, first of all, staff or applicant, anything else to provide to us before we start our discussion? Yes, go ahead.
Wanted to clarify, I noticed one of the exhibits that we provided, it probably isn't that clear. Jerry, do you know how to go back to the one we just got today? This is relative to the townhomes and what exposure they have adjacent to the existing community. I noticed on the architectural,
This one right
the other one, sorry,
the other
that-
colored?
yeah. What did we call that? We had a section through the site.
This one? You want that? You want this cross section through it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, got it. Right here.
Yeah, thank you.
Got it.
So we had just flashed by the naked architectural elevations, and they actually make it look as if the townhome is 3 stories on 2 sides. I want to be really clear that this back side has a living level patio with a bedroom level above it. It's 2 stories on this side, and it's 3 stories where the car parks essentially in a basement underneath. And so I think one of the other comments that was made is you would see the 2nd and 3rd floors, generally speaking, from the neighbors. But what we're suggesting is you're going to see the 3rd floor and the roof line. There's a 10-foot difference there. And we just want to be sure that that's clear. This section shows this is cut through.
Richard, you'll have to talk closer to the microphone in order to get this
Oh, I can use the pointer.
recorded.
Sorry.
You can do that.
So,
Excuse me. So there's a section line, a blue section line, excuse me, running through townhome here, fourplex. In the yellow is the back of, these are existing homes that are highlighted in yellow. And to the bottom of the page, at that location, you would see our townhome to the left, 3 stories on the north side, 2 stories on the, let's see, maybe I'm going the wrong direction.
I think that's right. South side, yeah.
South side.
Yep.
And then in the rear of that townhome, anywhere from 11 to 20 feet away, a wall that's approximately 10 feet high.
Mm-hmm.
And then the lot, the existing home above, in many cases is further up beyond that 10 feet. And so the exposure is quite a bit different than looking at living floor, bedroom floor, and roof. It's quite a bit lower than that.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks for that clarification. Okay, folks, I'm sure we have lots of comments and questions. Before we get into this discussion, I want to remind those that are here in the audience with us tonight that you are welcome to speak during the public comment portion, which I will hopefully get to in the next 30, 40 minutes or so. So if you would like to speak, obviously take your notes, make it brief, but we want to hear from you. We also want you to sign up on the sign-up sheet if you can, please, and I'll call the names once we get to that portion. Meantime, I'd like to open it up to the commission and see what we've got going. So if you could raise your hand so I can recognize you. I'm going to start here to my right with Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, Jerry and Richard. First one's real easy, is a typo on 40C. I think that should be East Side Fire and Rescue, not East Side Rest and Recreation. I don't know that anybody heard that. You got that, Lucy? Thank you. Jerry, could you give us the best view that shows pedestrian access to the park and ride other than the crosswalk? I feel like we've sort of squandered an opportunity to keep people from walking up Highlands Drive facing downhill traffic to get to the park and ride.
Here's the main entrance to the site. This is going to become a signalized intersection here too, where we're going to want to get the 4 crosswalks that lead across. I know we have a copy of that within the staff report as well. It's on page 20 of 40. And that's the main entrance into it. Which I have new stripes.
I think you're asking about the access to the park and ride, though?
To the park and ride, correct.
Which is this down here.
Right, but
So people being people are not going to walk to the west and then to the south to get to that park and ride. They're going to come up, they're going to go straight south up the hill.
They'll go up this hill. There's a crossing that leads to the park and ride lot over here by the YWCA.
Are you suggesting the pedestrian bridge?
The pedestrian bridge that
So-
crosses
But I think
over.
when you showed the internal pedestrian routes, that really didn't go to the pedestrian bridge. Can you go to that view, please?
Let's see which one. This one right here.
So does that, connect up with the pedestrian bridge, or does it head out to Highlands Drive?
This pretty much leads to the pedestrian bridge.
Actually, that one's at grade.
This is right at grade here. This is the park and ride lot. This is the lot right, the open paved area here.
That's where the buses are, yeah.
Yes,
the lot.
that's where the buses are, and this is the elevated garage right here.
So there's nothing that I've seen, sorry, Carl, if I could jump in here, but there's nothing that I've seen that travels people east to catch that bridge to cross.
To this piece right here. You have the sidewalk along Highlands Drive. There's a new sidewalk.
But
that
they would end up underneath that bridge, not connecting with the bridge, which
Right.
lands up.
Further up the hill. Further
which is
east.
further up the hill by the YWCA, yes.
Is your question how they get onto the bridge? Or how they
I'm
get to
asking
the
if
park
they
and
can get
ride?
on the bridge. I think we've just lost an opportunity. We're putting people out on Highlands Drive rather than looking for a way. We've got a pedestrian route coming down the
This one here.
east side of the property, but it puts them out back on Highlands Drive rather than using a bridge to avoid traffic. People don't like crossing traffic.
Well, on page 20 at the top, there is a crosswalk that's shown going from the dog area across into the parking lot. And that's the one that I think you were referring to later. And it's like, I've been down that road a number of times, so I'm not sure I like that location for a pedestrian crossing.
Right. Well, I actually walked this the other day. I took a bus, came across. The people that got off the bus, I climbed up the stairs in the parking garage and took the pedestrian bridge. And I arrived later on Ingram Street than those that got off and just ran across the road and walked up the driveway behind the YWCA.
It is a long route.
It
Yeah.
is a long route, and it seemed to be a preferred route for people. I don't know that there is a good way to get people from this lower A1 section up to the pedestrian bridge to cross back over. I get what you're saying, and I think it's the design of the bridge and the location of the bridge that actually precludes us from making it easy here. I'll have some comments in my turn when it comes to my turn about that crossing there, but I think that's at the at-grade. I think most people are going to walk south through the property, or at least to the
edge, to the
to whatever the west
park,
the west
basically.
entrance,
Yeah.
and get out there and cross to the park ride if they're going to the park ride, rather than crossing further north and walking up the hill.
When we
That's
first
my guess.
started talking to Polygon, we assumed that they would be using the bridge, and Richard can tell you, we pushed pretty hard for the bridge to be the connection. And then as we began to see the grades and where the bridge was, that it was on the south side of the drive, and where there could be places for them to tie into the bridge, we realized that it was going to be 2 or 3 stories up from the ground, and that we kind of reached the same conclusion that Jeff did, that people are not going to climb that and that they would run across. And as Jerry said, and it's an important point, we spent a long time talking to the police about the design of this to be safe, both, how cars use that and how pedestrians would use that, and it's important to consider this, that it is not a mid-block crossing, but will be a signalized intersection. So there will be like a traffic signal there. It's about the same distance north, about 400 feet north of the High Street intersection. So what we're doing is creating, on the same pattern as you move through the town center of Issaquah Highlands, another signal that includes the pedestrian crossing, and the timing of all of that will be linked to the lights so that the cars will be moving. When pedestrians are crossing east-west, cars are not moving north-south.
So it's actually a signal, not just flashing yellow or something?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, is that what you're referring to in condition 41A, where it says at the
Yeah.
nexus of Highlands Drive, YWCA?
Yes.
Okay.
Before we move on,
Yes.
another question, and that's if someone were in A1 and wanting to get to I-90, they're going to go all the way through up north to that main intersection, correct?
This one here,
Yeah.
yes.
To turn left on the 9th.
Yeah, so there's a lot of internal traffic for people to get out.
You
I
can
don't
certainly
know.
drive north on Highlands Drive to get to I-90. You can certainly drive south, too, on 9th, which leads to I-90. But, they'd be heading north at this point.
Yeah, no, question of
connection.
clarification, just a concern that it's going to have a lot of.
Your concern is that within the property, there's a lot of internal
It's going
circulation.
to force a lot
Yeah.
of traffic.
Well, except,
inside.
yeah, unless somebody was planning to go to I-90 from the north, they could get out on this side, make the right turn, and go out if they choose to do that. But,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
But they're people, so they won't.
Will there be a U-turn at the signal?
There's no plans to.
But there will be a signalized
There will be
turn?
it'll be a signalized intersection, yes, so they'll be able to make right turns and left turns there.
Will they be able to? They will be able to make left turns.
Oh,
there?
yes.
Once it opens
Yeah.
up to whatever that is,
So I'm
parcel
just
B, I
wondering
guess.
if someone's considered, Dan, has anybody talked about doing a U-turn there? Is it possible? No? Not enough room? Okay.
That's it for now.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Beard, new father.
Doubly so.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, I had 10 questions, but I'll work through these hopefully. So first of all, I'd like to state that I'm glad you clarified a little bit about the carport there, because that arrived in my mail, and I said that is not an Italian hillside village.
Well, it's not too complementary to the architecture of the other buildings.
No, so I'm not a fan of the carports for the vision that the Urban Village Commission and the city worked on. I don't think that is congruent with that. Architecturally, it's not anything that we talked about in the previous months. I know you guys will have a decision on that, but it just doesn't fit into what I think we agreed upon when we discussed this earlier. And then a few other questions. Could you go to the side elevation of the townhomes in Plot A2, please? I think you just passed it. So how would the city characterize that as a building with common walls and one roof? Is that 4 buildings or is that 1 building?
This is one typical building here.
Okay.
This is building number 14, so you're seeing 4 different sides to it.
Okay, so I'm looking at that, and when we talked about overall height and overall stories, we established a baseline from the exposed bottom level of any building.
Yeah, these are probably no taller than 40 feet when you look at the pitched roof element of it.
Understandable, but we set a limit of 3 stories, correct?
And these are 3 stories, yes.
Okay. So looking at the far right building, that is 3 stories, which is much higher than the far left building on that stepped road. Building
You're
P4.
referring to this?
Either one of them, top left, bottom right. Top left. Thank you. So when we set an elevation limit, we set a story limit, but the story limit was from the exposed bottom left story.
Are you saying these are not 3 stories?
No, I'm saying those are 3 stories, but I'm saying the 3 stories on the right is higher than the 3 stories on the left.
This?
Correct.
Well, that's the topography as it's stepping up the
Understandable,
hill.
but when we set an elevation limit, we set it's from the bottom of the exposed topography, not the top.
So let us, I hear your question, and I think what we need to do is go back and look at the development agreement and compare it to the elevations and give you a response.
Good, because I'm just looking at that and thinking this is kind of askew from what we talked about.
And I think what's important, too, is to look at the graphic in the development agreement that accompanies the text, because that was intended to clarify this exact situation. So when you look at that, it may be self-explanatory. If it isn't, we'll come back with a report.
Even
next
if
time.
it seems explanatory, we will respond in our memo to you.
Good, I appreciate that.
Well, were you expecting the finished floor for, in this example, there's what, 4 units? Did you expect the 4 units would all have the same finished floor elevation?
The top floor, yes.
Yes, okay.
Okay. And I know that's not,
just to be clear
that's
on
probably
that.
not how it's going to be, but we may have to limit the top. If it's going to be one common building, that's how we discussed it. So
Okay.
that's, in my mind, that's not 3 stories, that's like 3.5. So, and then another question was the T road at the top, road G. We talked about having to put a sidewalk in there for a handful of residents.
This here, there's no sidewalks on the plans today.
Okay, and my question was, could that be a Woonerf?
Well, this entire street could almost be one of those too.
Okay, and then what delineates that as a character street? You talked about that a little bit.
It's one of the street types that's in the development agreement. In some cases, it has separate walkways, all in one plane. with, say, bollards or other elements that define the walkways separate from the driving surface.
Okay.
However, it does allow, under certain circumstances, that you combine the walking surface and the driving surface essentially into a VUNERF, and I think that's an interesting point, that when you get all the way up to the top, that might be a good place to look at that, just given the very limited number of units up there. So we'll take a look at that as
Okay,
well.
I
But
appreciate
those
that.
are the only buildings within the entire complex without sidewalk connections.
All right.
Which is inconsistent with the overall plan as far as I'm concerned. So I'm glad you brought that up,
Yeah.
Michael. Thank you.
And then not question 4, but one of the conditions, considering motorcycle parking, there's a lot of language in there about must and the math. And
Well, it's a requirement of the development agreement that they provide a ratio of motorcycle parking.
Okay.
They're close to it. They're not quite
yeah,
there yet.
well, that's my question.
Yeah.
If it's a requirement and they're short, it seems
Just
that's
a little
short.
bit.
Yeah, a little bit, but a little bit 4 stories, 3 stories. That's a difference too of a little bit.
It is.
So,
But we'll research that too.
okay, thank you. And then I'm looking at the parking ratio. There are 548 bedrooms in this projects here, and there are 342 parking stalls provided, or parking units. And that ratio seems a little bit, it seems a little light to me. So I don't know that if every bedroom will have a driver, but certainly many of these households will have 2 drivers, including some of the 1-bedroom units. So I think the ratio of 342 may be light, even if it's 1 or 2 occupants who do have vehicles here.
Yeah, the ratio is low, but that is a standard with the development agreement. They need to have at least that one per unit.
It does meet the minimum.
Yeah,
but
and the two bedrooms, of course, are more, and a number of them have more bedrooms than that. Then the ratio goes up. It does set a maximum parking for the whole complex of 569.
Yeah, so my view on this and looking at this, I think it's light, and I think it will contribute to some
The 342
yes,
stalls.
some potential issues. So you mentioned some parking before.
Well, a lot of the apartments and even the townhouses, they also have aprons in front too. We were looking at that as parking too. Of course, that would almost be construed as tandem parking too, and there's some limitations on tandem parking.
Yeah,
But it really isn't. That would be surplus additional parking.
potentially.
addition, that does not
It's not as
count.
usable because, one other question. I look at these garages and they're drive-in, no separate access to the house. So they may be large storage units with people parking in front of them with their cars. That's how I would live.
Well,
there,
that's true for
potentially.
any garage, for multifamily or single
Yeah,
family,
so
is
my
where
point
garages become
That's correct.
mini
My-
storage facilities.
I agree. So
Yeah.
my point ultimately is I think we're short on parking. Yeah, and then there's a minimal amount of street parking there. So I think
There is some street parking to parallel stalls on the major roadways.
How many was that? Was that 30?
I'd have to count it.
Okay. Ultimately, I feel we're short on parking.
Yeah.
And then the pea patch there, being the father of a toddler, what separates that pea patch from Highlands Drive? Is there a wall or a fence that we're proposing? So that's a dog run
This is the dog run. The pea patch
right there.
is right up here.
Goes down.
Down, it's
There you
pretty
go.
Oh,
much
this
right
is the
there.
pea patch.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I was at the children's play area.
Okay.
The pea patch does have a low fence. I think it's about 4 feet high.
Okay.
And that's, keep kids from going out, like you said. Also to keep animals from going into those pea patches.
What
During the
about
evening
traffic,
hours.
what about traffic veering into that area? Is there some kind of protection?
Traffic veering in from where Highlands Drive?
Drive.
Well, there is a landscape buffer out here in front.
Is it a drop off or an elevation rise from Highlands Drive into the property there? Okay. I know one of the neighbors earlier was concerned about that at the north end there of people falling in her yard, so maybe.
Right.
I mean, that's something you guys will deal with. We're not going to talk about that,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't think. And then one other question. You talked about there'll be fall protection for anything over 2.5 feet. And
Walkways that are adjacent
yes.
vertical
And that led
drops.
me to wonder about the properties in A2, the existing homeowners who will have a 10-foot wall built 4 feet from their houses. And I think, yeah.
These owners right here,
Yep, I think there are fences there.
they do have fences there now.
They do, but it makes you wonder how secure those fences are, and if they do have to be replaced or reinforced. Is that a cost that will be passed on to the homeowners? Is that something the property owner, the
I
city
don't think
will?
that had even been considered yet.
Okay, I would consider it if I live there, so,
Yeah, because it is a substantial drop.
yeah. And then my other question leading into that, the elevations on drawing C7, or when you gave the mean sea level drawings there, a 480 feet, 540, whatever those were, right there.
That's these elevations here. That's
Yeah.
the, and you'll see the topography lines as well as the spot elevations. You know, that's what's been approved.
Okay, so see where it says like 500 or 525 at the dog leg?
I do, yeah, or it climbs uphill.
Yeah, what part of the property was it taken from? Is that the maximum or the lowest elevation of that property?
Well, the highest is up here at the far east end. That's goes up to as high as 540 feet.
North or south, yeah.
That's the east end right here. About 525 is in the middle.
What he's saying, what he's asking, if I might clarify, is the 525 or the 500, is it on the north side of that piece of land or the south side of that piece of land?
Well, it pretty
it
much
looks like
runs
It
north
is a
and
contour
south
line,
from
but
there.
if you look right by the
They
525,
Yeah,
we have a pretty significant elevation gain there near the property line.
yeah.
So if we're talking about 10 feet, there's almost an existent 10 feet difference there. So I'm really just curious how accurate that is. Because if you look closer, you look at the elevation rise and runs there.
Yeah.
At the south part of this property line here, it's 525, but I mean it could really be 535. We're talking about a 10-foot difference there. It's a little gray to me.
Yeah, you can probably, can you see the numbers that are even smaller?
Mm-hmm. And they're
And that's a
better
little
on the
bit more
drawing. Yeah.
accurate. The big numbers kind of overlap some of them.
Michael, are you asking where the, say, the 525 contour line meets the south property line up against Issaquah Highlands, what the elevation is immediately on the Issaquah Highlands side?
Yeah, more or less.
Okay, I don't know.
Okay.
We'll find out.
Because where the contour, it slips over into the polygon property a little bit, and there's a pretty decent sized hill there and a pretty decent elevation change. It looks like it's some places up to 15 feet there. So if we're talking about 10 feet difference with a wall there, these numbers might not be as accurate when we're looking at view lines, especially with the section that you guys took. Looking that way, it's not as accurate.
With that
if we're looking-
cross section that went through
Yep.
here.
Not as accurate as if we're looking due north. So, and then I appreciate your patience. I know.
No, that's fine.
But hopefully I'll get them out of the way. If we look at number 36 on this conditions. Yeah, thank you. So if we look at 36, it says a minimum of 3 required elements of the design shall be implemented and shall be shown with the building permits. Do you have an idea yet of what those 3 conditions are going to be yet?
No, not at all.
Okay, so we're not at that stage yet.
No, but there's a choice of different elements that they can choose from.
Yeah, I know we discussed it. I was just curious
Yeah.
what they're going to be.
You know, solar panels, there's many things they could choose from.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That was excellent insight there. Actually, Eric, I think you were next.
Yeah, I
Thank
just
you.
had a question. If you want to go back to the red streets, that you had the slide with the red streets, or the streets were highlighted red. Yeah, there you go.
This one here.
Yeah, so for A2, I just was trying to get in my mind how, say Cleanscapes would go in there
In
and
here?
get out of there. Would they have to just back up that all the way back into that?
We'll have to drive up through here and back here, and out.
Okay, so we were talking about Winterf, and so then I guess that'll be taken into consideration that if there is a Winterf, that both fire departments and Cleanscapes would be able to get in. And,
They've all got to be on board for that
right,
approval.
right, okay.
There's actually a fire turnaround standard that's in the development agreement, and the design of Road G and relative to Road F is consistent with the fire turnaround
Okay.
requirement. So if it works for a fire a ladder truck, it should work for
Should, yeah.
Cleanscapes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's so tight, there's no way they're ever be able to get, obviously, a cul-de-sac into that space, so, the hammerhead design is what they'll have to
One
go
last
with.
thing, could you clarify garden style? Just add a little bit to that, garden style, what that means?
Well, that has to do with the way they're laid out on these major green spaces. That's your front doors and walkways. They'll be very, very pleasant when you look at them, I guess is one way to say it. You'll be looking at landscaping, your patios, your decks. You won't be looking at parked vehicles. That's going to be the main entrance into these units.
Okay, thank you.
It's kind of a garden style. I think the applicant used the word campus also.
Okay.
They're synonymous.
Okay, move to Stephanie, thank you.
So the only comments that I had that weren't mentioned already on condition number 19, where it's talking about carports being a substitute for parking lot landscaping.
Right. I mean, if you look at like this lot right here, this is over by the clubhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looks like in this view it's a large surface parking lot, but there's also carports in it too. And on your drawings, you'll see some X's through those parking stalls. Those are the carports.
So it shows on page 23 also, it shows the double load
Yeah,
parking lots.
these are double loaded here. There's double loaded ones down here as well too. These are lots where we want to see the opportunities to include landscaping. We have a ratio of so many trees based on the number of parking stalls. These currently do not meet that standard.
So there's language in here about carports are not approved as a substitute for landscaping.
That's
and
true.
further down where you want shrubbery to be next to where there's any pedestrian walkways, but then we propose to
Like
say
up here, yes.
carports count as landscaping. I just don't feel like it fits in with the rest of the dialogue about the overall look of the project.
Yeah, I think we're talking about two different things though, because certainly when you have a walkway right here and they are adjacent carports, we want that walkway to be a very pleasant walkway when you go past these carports, both the design, having evergreen shrubs, not deciduous, but evergreen shrubs that'll hide the bottom sides of these vehicles, these parked vehicles
Yeah,
throughout
and
the
that's
year.
what it's saying at the bottom of page 23, but then
Right.
condition 19 is saying, let's let carports substitute for landscaping and trees.
Well, because
So
when
it
you look
seems
at
really-
when you look at a lot like this, for instance, you don't have any peninsula islands in it,
Mm-hmm.
where normally that's where you would put in some canopy type trees.
But,
I
but
think-
it doesn't
I think-
specify the double load versus single load, it just says carports, let them be
So I
landscaping.
think I think Jerry's right that we're talking about two things, two different standards. One standard has to do with the 10% parking lot landscape. And so the condition that you identified is, we have some alternatives that allow you to substitute the trees or the 10% landscape with architectural elements, but carports aren't identified as a substitute for that. So this condition's about that. Then there's another landscape standard that the edge of parking lots where pedestrians are have to have hedges or walls or something like that. And so that we are not taking away.
So if
And-
there was a carport, you would still need to have, if it was near a walkway, you'd still need to have some sort of landscaping buffer.
Right, we're even, condition number 6 brings in the issue that, especially on that main east-west walkway, can you point that one out? Yeah. The one north of buildings 4 and 3.
This is the main one.
Actually, the one north of that, yeah, that one.
This is the
That-
one that we are asking that it be a little bit more linear instead of kind of wrapping around the building.
Exactly, and
And the
that the
carport's right
design of the
here.
carports include a screen or a green screen or some kind of element that almost makes it into like a structure or something that makes it more pedestrian friendly and works with the landscape such as the hedge.
So the only areas where landscaping would not necessarily be necessary if there were carports, are we talking more of the double areas like by the clubhouse?
Actually, any of the carports are all located in surface parking areas, which would require the 10% internal landscape.
Okay.
Okay? So there's the internal landscape and there's the edge landscape. So we're talking about the carports potentially substituting for the internal landscape, but not for the edge landscape.
Okay, that makes sense. Oh, and then just was going to point out on page 5, the second paragraph from the bottom, it says 198. I think it's supposed to be 298.
What was that again about page 5?
Page 5, the second paragraph from the bottom, it just refers to 198 dwelling units.
Yes.
I think it should be 298.
Oh, thank you, that's true.
I think that was it.
Thank you, Stephanie. Scott, you were next.
Yes, thank you. My question pertains to item number 35 around stormwater. And the question being, I don't know that we've touched base on this previously in earlier conversations. What is the intent for stormwater runoff and management for this build-out?
Would you like to
And
speak with this,
I go
Dan?
into further detail here as it relates to the call-out around Black Nugget Creek. Are we indicating that there is going to be overflow potential that will distribute into Black Nugget Creek?
Not overflow potential. The stormwater discharge from this site discharges to Black Nugget Creek. So the site is controlled by the development agreement, which has embedded in it the master drainage plan. The master drainage plan includes the specific details for each of the neighborhoods. This particular neighborhood has an option embedded in it. Stormwater can either discharge to Black Nugget Creek, or it can be used to do an early test of the infiltration system, and in that regard can satisfy some of the LID requirement, 30% overall LID requirement for the project. The applicant has elected not to do that, and we're in receipt of a letter from the property owner, from the property administrator, agreeing to implement the LID, the 30% overall LID obligation on the remaining parcels. So this parcel is free to discharge without LID facilities to Black Nugget Creek. So there'll be a relatively conventional detention, then treatment, then discharge to Black Nugget Creek, and the discharge will be limited to the pre-development rate. And the treatment train is 2 trains. It's both sensitive lake treatment standard and enhanced treatment standard. So it meets the metals and the phosphorus reduction targets in the master drainage plan.
Okay, and that's located, that treatment facility would be located on site?
Not necessarily. It's currently shown in the right-of-way adjacent to Highlands Drive. In order for the applicant to do that, they would need a franchise in order to place and maintain those facilities there, because they will be privately owned and privately maintained. In the event they can't obtain that franchise, and the city would be the agency that issues that franchise, but in the case they can't, then those facilities would have to be moved onto the property, and they'd have to be located on private property, not within the right-of-way.
Okay, thank you for that. One follow-up question as it relates to item number 41, sub-item F, special pavement markings that signal the presence of a crosswalk. Can we get some further clarification in regards to what that translates to, or what that
On the
vision
crossing?
What are you, well,
When we say special pavement markings, so Mark brought up a good point earlier about, Mike, sorry.
the other mark.
The other Mark. You know, a good example would be the intersection by target, right? So at what point are we differentiating the material? Is there going to be reflective materials that bring to light? There is a section there.
So we may be able to provide some additional information. It hasn't been designed, and this really is a technical matter, you know, so we'll see what information we can provide you at this point in response to your question.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Nina, you are next, and then I'm going to go to Jim. Not to the Jim. I'm Jim Kieberich.
Just to me first.
Thanks.
Okay, I need a little background about ownership before I ask a question, in that when this apartment community is built, then who ends up being the ultimate owner of the apartment community, and in regards to liability and responsibility and that sort of thing? Does that
Well,
how
at
does
this
that
time,
work?
Polygon would be the owner of the buildings.
Okay. And then,
I mean, they could be sold later too, of
yeah,
course.
right. Okay, one of the reasons why I wanted to ask about that was the public comments regarding maintenance of buildings, which I'll come back to in a moment, and then maybe more significantly something that Michael brought up, and that is the 10-foot wall that is in the interface between the adjacent properties and this community, and thinking about those two as examples of future issues and maintenance issues that would have, which I would hope would have some kind of oversight. I'm thinking about Issaquah Highlands. We have even though we have rental communities within Issaquah Highlands, they're all beholden to the maintenance standards that the community has. And I just can't remember what we have in the development agreement for this community going forward in maintenance standards.
That,
You can come back to that later. Can I leave that as a question to work
right.
on? Because I just can't remember.
think that is an internal matter. I mean,
Yeah, well, because we had it in Issaquah Highlands, I wondered if we also had it in this development agreement. That there
well,
was
I mean, the formation of the homeowners association and the maintenance standards that the homeowners association establishes is a private issue.
And there is mention in here about the CCNRs and how they will be established in the future, and those CCNRs would apply to this property as well. Is that right?
I think they've already been established and they do apply to this
Okay,
property.
excellent. I just wanted to shine a little more light on that and understand it better for myself, too. Another thing I wanted to mention was about parking. I want to disagree with Michael because I like to. He's right. It's light on parking, but also this is an opportunity to have a transit-oriented development, and its location next to the park and ride is ideal for that. And if there are some other things that we can do to make it more that way, so that people are using the transit more than their cars, then maybe we can balance the deficiency that you correctly identified. I want to disagree with a condition, I think it's condition number 7, with the realignment of the sidewalk on the north side of Building 4, because I'm a walker, and that's a delightful little curve in the sidewalk. I would not take that curve out for anything. You can make the road straight as an arrow if you want.
It's right here.
Yeah, but the sidewalk makes a nice little curve there. It has a relationship with the architecture of the building. I think it's beautiful. I wouldn't sweat that.
Well, we almost felt it was kind of forced into it.
Yeah.
I think what you're saying is that it's great when there are quirks and interesting elements in a walkway.
Yes.
And I think that this, and we've begun discussions with the applicant about how to move forward. I think this looked like it was just shoved out of the way for the building and pushed up closer to the road and not designed in an intentional way to make it pleasant for the pedestrian. So I think what you're pointing out is that straightening it may not necessarily be the solution, but doing it intentionally to benefit the pedestrian seems important.
Or an unintentional delightful curve.
Okay,
It's
a
possible.
delightful curve I would accept. We've got a segmented.
I have many of those unintentional delightful curves, so thank you.
I do too. Okay, and the last one that I want to talk about tonight is the connection between A2 and Issaquah Highlands and the condition number 14 that says, I know this is an outstanding, well, it's outstanding in many ways, but it's unresolved right now, and it has many steps to get resolved, but I'd like to make an official plea for making that connection. I think it would be great for both communities to be able to amble through their pedestrians only, and stairs would make it especially nice. So that's it. Thank you very much.
And there's quite a few staircases throughout this complex too, if you've seen on the plans.
All right, Jim, you're up.
Thank you. First of all, on condition number 30, I just need clarification. It says that that the connection cannot meet city standards for maximum velocity for fire flow. Do you want more or less velocity, Dan?
Less.
Why do you want less?
It imposes fewer loads on the pipe and has less potential for water hammer and surges.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. That was quick. Yeah.
Well, we're getting a lot of really technical engineering questions tonight.
I got to do something to look smart. Let's see. Yeah, thanks. Where do I go from here? The Architectural Review Committee has approved the designs, and what Architectural Review Committee approved it? I couldn't really tell from the letter.
It's signed by Tim Lee. He's with Lakeside, the company.
So the letter only approves the site plan, the one that Jerry's showing, and the Architectural Review Committee was formed by Lakeside and includes the representative appointed by the mayor. And
It was what we had previously agreed to. Okay, fair enough. Okay, and is the dog park fenced in completely? Michael cares about the kids in the pea patch. I care about the dogs.
There is fencing. There's also that large retaining wall, too,
Okay.
on the
retaining
south
wall would
side
be to the
to the south.
Oh, to the south.
Yes,
Also
to the south.
Okay.
It's quite tall. It's about 15 feet tall.
Okay. Is it completely fenced in so the dogs can't get out of that park? Okay.
A Great Dane maybe could, but I don't know if there's going to be a pound limit for dogs.
Okay. Let's see. You had mentioned the farming of the trees on the north edge and the 3-year agreement to remove trees that had been knocked over. Thanks for being.
Let me go up to one of the colored ones. And there's quite a few trees up here.
Yeah, well, see, that was my question. If I look at 280th, I think, is the road that parallels on the other side of the property
Is
line.
that up over this direction in the county?
Yeah, over the north.
To the north, yeah.
It looks to me like the property line actually doesn't take out too many of those trees. All I could see was maybe one deep.
Well, hopefully that'll be the case.
Okay. But the property line does go back, so it could be 2 or 3 deep? Or
It could be, yes. And, depends on how much damage there would be to the root zone, too, on whether a tree
Jerry,
could be
could
saved.
you show that existing aerial site photo? That might help us.
Would that have the property line on it? And
That was kind of up front.
Whoops, you just
Oh, yeah.
passed it. There.
okay, so it does.
I mean, you have trees on both sides here.
Right, but some of that greenery that's down a little bit lower
Like
is
thi-
not
like
actually
this?
trees. Right.
Jim, are you
Yeah,
thinking that condition isn't necessary?
No. I was just curious as to how many trees are actually going to be farmed out of there, and I don't think it's actually that much.
Yeah, we don't have an actual tree survey of what trees would be removed yet.
Okay. And then on the large retaining wall that's there now that you said it was going to be prettied up
That's the one that's
for the dog run,
right here.
so the dogs have something nice to run next to. Now, the buildings that are down there.
Yeah, in fact, there's the wall.
Yeah. Is that, I think that elevation was 450 feet, is that correct?
About 450, correct?
And so is that finished grade for those buildings then?
This is the finished grade of the site when it's filled.
Okay, so all those buildings down there, they'll clearly have no effect on the views other than looking down
No,
onto the
they
top
won't.
of them. Okay. And then up in the panhandle.
And there is fencing up here at the top too. You can barely see it in that.
Okay, the duck's bill for Mark. I was just curious if any thought was given to, because in particular, and Michael, actually, you guys had the discussion about the elevation that's allowed for the buildings, and I remember those conversations. We had them both for the Lakeside agreement and also for the development agreement on just this particular.
You're
site.
referring to the panhandle again?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think, well, the whole thing. But we had talked about certain elevations in terms of stories, but I think we later may have changed that to feet because we weren't sure how tall a story would be. But it's still, if I'm looking at a 4-story building, to me, you're looking at about 45 feet, something like that.
Right, these are about 38 feet or so.
Well,
Okay.
the 4-story building, the language was inconsistent in the presentation where the 4-story buildings had a parenthetical 48 feet,
Yeah.
but the 3-story buildings didn't have a parenthetical 36 feet or something else. So
Right.
I'm assuming it's, if we're talking 4 equals 48, I think 3 equals 36 or 12
Yeah.
stories. But
12
I'd like to
stories.
see clarification on that.
The larger site gives actually a floor limit as well as a feet limit here. And
Yeah.
of course, it's more restrictive here on the north line. What I saw in the development agreement was a restriction to 3 floors in here. I didn't see that
Yeah.
feet.
So I'm looking at the development agreement because you made me curious. And we're not going to totally answer this, but I will say that in A2, it says 3 stories, parentheses,
Yeah.
maximum building height, and it's not a number.
I just,
And so you're making me curious. So we'll have to do a little digging.
Yeah, I thought we did. Yeah.
Yes. So,
I mean, we read these as 3 stories, even with it built into the topography.
Right, but I recall us having several conversations about someone deciding that 1 story could be a 15, 20-foot cathedral type of ceiling within a story, right? Like,
That's
like a hotel lobby.
pretty common in home sites where the lower floor will have larger
I
ceiling to
understand
floor heights.
that's why I brought it up
Yeah.
and we had that conversation. I mean, I know others did as well, so we should double check that,
yeah,
but
I will go back and look through the edits
thank you.
to see if something didn't get incorporated into the.
Right.
Okay, and then I'm looking at the westernmost, I guess, apartment complex building, number 7 or T1, and that to me is where you have the biggest elevation drop.
Down at this direction?
No, the Duxbill Panhandle.
Oh, you're up here again.
Yeah, T1 is that one.
That's the first one, yes.
Right. And so to me, it certainly in terms of what Michael had brought up, you know, you may have a rather significant change from the base elevation to the rooftop.
Yeah, and that appears to be, what, a 2-unit building?
But
Is that correct?
Is it still 3 stories?
It's still 3 stories, yes.
So,
Well,
okay.
actually, so can you go to the one that shows all the neighborhoods?
To the neighborhood?
The colored map from the development agreement that shows like A1,
Oh,
A2,
yeah.
A, B, C. Yes. So if you see up at the top, there's the band between A2 and A1 is quite faint. Do you see the band? No, the one that's going across the neck? Yeah, the banding on the neck.
There it is.
It's not actually at the bend. It was lined up with sort of where the houses were. So that T1 that you're pointing, even though it's a townhouse, it could actually be taller because it's in A1.
Technicalities, okay. So, and thank you for that. I guess the last question I had, maybe more for Richard, I'm not sure. But as I'm looking at certainly T8 and T9, maybe even T7, T8, the townhomes. And
These up here at the very,
yeah.
very end.
To me, those are the ones that are the biggest issues for the neighbors to the east.
I think you're correct on that.
And was there ever any thought to, and I'm certainly not one to criticize capitalism and, you know, getting the most you can out of this, but was there ever any thought to just abandoning those? I mean, for, you know, you're looking at maybe 15 units or something like that max, just to appease everyone and, you know, maybe even have an open space in there.
Short answer is not really, because that is significant in the
Would you like to speak at the microphone? We have to pick it all up.
Yeah, sorry. The short answer would be that's a significant impact to the finance of the, and the function of the project. And so 15 units is actually a pretty big deal. We didn't necessarily come to that thought either because we felt we were totally in compliance and maybe under perhaps what some of the anticipated heights could be in that area. And I know there's a debate about where we're going to measure it from, but it didn't seem to us that there was a need to go that direction.
And I don't disagree that you're not in compliance. That's not the issue. It's just trying to be a good neighbor, and
Sure.
so those are really all the questions I had. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
That is one of the comments that was addressed in several of the letters we received from the neighborhood too, where they were asking some of that density within that panhandle be moved over to the neighborhood A.
Okay, so we need to get to public comment in a moment, but I still have my questions, and I will try and make them quick, and I don't know that y'all believe me. I want to start on page 34. This also is a typo. I'm assuming bullet point under public comments. I believe buildings, it's the second line of the first bullet point. It says elevation of 480 feet. I think that's supposed to be 48. Is that correct? Are you with me on that?
Yes.
Anyone?
I
Page
do.
34. First bullet point.
I have to look at the comments from the neighbors.
3 or 4 stories not wanting the building to exceed an elevation of 48 feet, not 480 feet. I think that would...
Well,
They're talking about elevation, the elevation.
so elevation, you see some of the elevations,
the elevation of 400, so is that correct?
like 520,
Okay.
480.
All right, so that's the...
It's a datum, not a height.
Thank you. Okay. I want to make that clear to me, apparently. All right. Okay. Let's see. To be extremely blunt, I despise carports, and I don't think they have any place in this development or anywhere in the Highlands. I don't understand why they can't be just surface parking with other elements around it or something else. I would completely. I mean, to me, it's a showstopper. I hate carports. So now whether it's in compliance or not is a different story. But for me, it's a showstopper personally. So every discussion around carports to me is sort of moot in my mind because I would rather see nothing there than a carport. When we talk about number 10, the redesign for the garage presence, I understand that, and I think that's good. I think we talk a little bit about how garage-fronted homes are very social, and in the Highlands we've seen a lot of evidence of them being sort of the most active. I do agree with minimizing them instead of them jutting out and being the primary thing that people see, but I'd hate to sort of get rid of them altogether because that's where people really gather and talk and so forth. Let's see. Number 11, about in the middle of the paragraph, walls adjacent to pedestrian facilities and places congregate must be reduced to about 4 feet. What does that mean? About? Is that
Approximately, it could be
3, 5, 2.5?
It could be 40 inches. It could be
Yeah,
50 inches.
I think maybe we need to have a more definitive number there because I don't know how people define about.
It's a guideline, not a standard.
Okay. It's a boot, not about. Okay. Number 14, same thing. Nina talked about it. The question that I have is adjacent property owner, Division 2. Who is the adjacent property owner? Who is that?
We meant to check that, and we'll get you. I think some of it is IHCA, and some of it may be shared between the homes. So we'll provide that in our response.
Yeah, I mean, because my concern there is, with all due respect to the homeowners there, I don't know that, 2, 3, 4, 10 homeowners should determine whether or not the entire community has access to another community. Because they don't want a walkway near their home for whatever reason. They may have very valid reasons, but at the same time, I think it's the community. It's a community benefit as opposed to specific homeowners. What's that?
I think they might like it.
Well, I think they might like it too. I'm not saying it's a negative thing. I think it's going to be a positive thing, but I'd hate for one person or a couple of people to determine for the rest of the community that they can't have it. And I think we need to find out who the appropriate property owners are and. Yeah,
Are you volunteering for a mediation?
Sure, why not? All right, let's see. So number 19 sort of goes to my carport discussion. I'm completely opposed not to just carports, but substituting carports for, parking lot landscape and trees. I noted motorcycle parking. Thank you for following up on that. Let's see. All right, 41. So I'm assuming including the following means all, not some of those? Or is it?
All of them.
It's all of them, okay. So maybe we want to say all of the following. I know we had another one somewhere in the past where it could have been 2 or 3, but it might be all of them. So let's be clear about that. And then I'd like to recommend.
Can I tell you the secret of code to writing? No, you see how they all end with commas?
All end with what?
Commas. I'm not saying we won't clarify the language, but when they all end with commas,
They
then
don't all end with commas. Number 1 ends with period.
Dan. No,
See, I knew the secret, but that's what threw me
The
off.
others do.
my decoder ring failed me.
And might I make a recommendation that, I think that's going to be a pretty dangerous and also sought-after intersection for pedestrians. As I mentioned, I saw a bunch of people running across the road the other day, and we don't even have a development over there. I'd like to recommend that, and I don't know who would decide this, but the embedded lights in the road on 156th and Bellevue near the Starbucks Jack in the Box.
Yeah, that's by the new, it is by Starbucks.
Jack in the
I've
Box,
seen it. Yeah, they
McDonald's.
turn kind of orange.
Those things are amazing. I think that would be a totally appropriate type of thing right here. If we could make that happen, I think it's just so much better for drivers to see.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more. I believe that we began to talk to the police about that, and they actually had some concerns about inconsistencies within the city in terms of how.
Yeah. No, I know. I'm just saying Bellevue doesn't have them everywhere either, but I think in key areas it makes sense. Yeah. Let's see. So I'd like to respond to Jim's comment about A2. I think it's perfectly appropriate what we're doing up there. I want to obviously reduce the impact, but I think it's well within the confines of the development agreement, and I think the property owner has perfect right to build there. Obviously, I want continuity and respect of adjacent properties. So to the extent that we can do that, I think that's terrific. And I may be repeating a couple things, but briefly, I'm looking at the carports again. Devco is a good example of a similar type of project. I know it's different, but similar. I don't remember seeing any carports like this in that property, so if you haven't taken a look at that, we might want to take a look at what they're doing there. I think it's pretty clean. Let's see. What is the grade up the panhandle there? So if somebody was walking up it, what kind of grade do we expect to see there?
You'll have grades of 14% at least in stretches.
15%? Okay, thanks. It's going to be it's a great sledding hill. Okay.
No, 15.
In terms of architecture, and forgive me, Polygon here, but the Forest Ridge homes, while that's a very nice neighborhood and the homes are lovely, those are your homes, right? Polygon, right? This is just a personal opinion, but the character of some of those homes, the look of some of those homes with some of the overhangs that seem to be just almost afterthoughts or very small. I don't know if anybody else knows what I'm talking about. Cattywampus is a word I heard. I don't think they fit really within the character of the Issaquah Highlands. I would encourage you guys to take a look at some of the other neighborhoods. I'm sure you have, but maybe look again. And I kind of feel that they're very kind of sparse and they just don't feel quite right in Forest Ridge. I'm talking about the extra architecture or the extra elements that are added to the homes, not the homes themselves, but the extra elements added to them. It just doesn't feel right. Embellishments, overhangs, I'm not seeing a lot of porches and patios and that sort of thing. Nice, and I think that this garden style community will really lend itself to something like that and really, I know they're apartments versus homes, but I think there's an opportunity to do something there a little bit nicer. And while it's not Issaquah Highlands, again, we're trying to connect these guys in some way. Let's see. I'll try and finish real quick here. Garages, parking. I'd like to see at some point what we know about the driveway lengths, because we talk. I agree with Nina that she likes to agree with Michael, but I prefer to agree with Michael on the parking, that it's a little bit low. I don't know how many street parking parallel spots there are. I'd like to understand that, and I'd like to understand how many driveways we think will be large enough to accommodate additional cars, so that we can have, we have a very specific number of 300 and, 52, 62, whatever it is, 42 parking spots. But given the development, we also believe there are another 44 spots that are available that people could use, but they're not necessarily being counted, whatever that number is. And then I think the last thing for me is the dog park. And if you haven't seen the Bark Park up in Issaquah Highlands, just from an aesthetic point of view and just amenity point of view, I'd encourage whoever's building that to take a look at the Bark Park in Issaquah Highlands as a model for potentially what you could have down there, because it works out pretty well. And I think that's it for me. Anybody else want to say anything before we move on to public comment? Tim, did you have anything? Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's go ahead and open up public comment. If you could hand me the sheet, I'd appreciate it.
Has everybody signed up that wants to speak?
Actually, what's the first name on there, Tim? Sorry, Jerry.
Jerry, can you look at the first name?
So I can call them.
Is it
Ann?
Finney?
Okay. Yeah, Ann Finney. So if I could, so I'm opening the public comment at 9:04, and if you could please, again, keep your comments as brief as you can and direct as you can. We'd love to hear them. Thank you.
Hi, how are you, Jerry? Hi, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. And
I'm sorry, we'll have to have you state your name and address as well.
Oh, of
Thank
course. My name is Ann Finney. I live at 1875 10th Avenue Northeast in the Issaquah Highlands Panhandle area. My home is pretty much right where that 547 mark is. And I did have several concerns. First of all, you guys are in receipt of my letter. Ideally, what I think my neighbors and I would love to see is incorporation of those townhomes into the rest of the site for a host of reasons stated in the letter that I wrote. Being a realist, I realize that probably is not going to happen. So I do have some requests that would I would ask that be considered. I too am a walker, and I walk probably easily 20 miles every week within the Issaquah Highlands community. So I don't mind seeing a connection. I think that's fantastic. But what the joy of walking in the community is to see variation in the architecture and beautiful landscaping that complements our community and our setting. And I think that we can certainly do a better job at that. Some of the elevations that I have noticed are very plain, especially when you're looking from this panhandle section into the rears of those townhouses. They're extremely boxy and just not aesthetically pleasing. So I would ask that be considered. We right now have a lovely view of the forests. Some of the homes in that panhandle are going to be pretty much completely blocked. I'm a little more fortunate that my house sits a little bit higher, but when you start working your way up toward the east, those houses will have absolutely, essentially, no view except for the back of that townhouse. So that's something to consider. See where it says 540? Well, that whole stretch there, that's not going to have the view corridor that was stated in the development agreement. So when you look even to the left or to the right, you see just nothing but a row of houses. And the distance between the townhouses was listed at about 15 feet or so, if I remember correctly. That's not a view corridor. I think it's dense. I think it can be more space between them. it's a very legitimate concern that there's no sidewalks. The other concern that I haven't heard addressed is, as we all know, people end up using their carports for storage. You can fit one car in at best in a two-car garage, the way the homes are typically built today. Are those other cars going to be parked on the street? And if so, what does that do to access for the fire trucks? How are we going to have emergency access if there's spillover onto the streets? Has that been accounted for? I didn't see that addressed anywhere, so maybe somebody could make sure that that's addressed appropriately. I'm at the point where 10-foot drop is immediately behind my fence. That changes, and as it gets east, that drop becomes less and less and less. But it goes further down in this direction. So how close is that wall going to be to the fence line that exists currently? Is that 10-foot drop going to be built in such a way that ensures that my soil is stable? When erosion occurs, it's going to erode eventually. The water will take that soil down. What assurances do we have that erosion isn't going to take away the footing that's holding my fence post up? So that's a concern. I too think the carports are hideous. They're just really not sightly. There's perhaps something that can be done to make them architecturally more interesting. So that would be a request that I have. But otherwise, I think the project down in this section that's A1 is a fantastic idea. I'm loving the fact that we're getting a community up there. But I really think that ideally, less density in A2, or just totally getting those units incorporated into A1. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Finney. Okay, next is Gary Lynn. Again, please state your name and address. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Gary Lin. I live in the 1881 10th Avenue in the A2 Panhandle area. So actually, I share some concern as Anne mentioned, and however, I have more concern regarding the future resident in the A2 area. From the site development map, and also indicate there is no single pedestrians road connect between A1 and A2. I think that is really disconnected. And I will say that, can we move this high density, this A2 area? Because sounds like there's no way to add some trial road or something. So can we move those kind of development townhouse to the A1 area so that we be able to have some open space like a clubhouse? We move those clubhouse there or swimming pool out there, so that we be able to have a pleasant environment to both those potential resident and adjacent neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lin. Mr. Vredenberg.
Hi, I'm Dan Vredenberg, live at 1128 Northeast Katsura Street, Issaquah, 98029. We've obviously been before you before, sent you a bunch of letters. Really want to point out some of the differences, because I think it doesn't really show when you look at a flat map that there are really two different situations and why we ended up with this A1 and A2. A1, I have no problem with. And I could, it has 268 units. I think it's authorized to go to 325 or 326. Be happy to add the 30 from A2 into there, and even increase it. So in terms of the economic argument, I don't think that's terribly viable in terms of trying to say that reducing or eliminating or reducing the size or just moving all the ones from A2. Because if you look at the overall topography as you move up, let's see, where's that? I don't know if I can
Just
get
move
the
it
clue.
around and it'll wake up. There you go.
Okay. So as you leave, you see the big distances from, the existing homeowners. You got a fairly big buffer and there's a big drop off there. But as you come up here, it just gets right next to us, and technically it could be 4 feet, and maybe it's going to be 10 or 12, but it's a big difference. And there's a number of homes that are basically 2-story. Mine's a 2-story, my neighbor's is a 2-story, the next one, all of that area, and several of them going the other way. And so trying to put right, bringing that development and the road all the way up, because the topography totally changes as you go from A1 into A2, is where it becomes a real challenge, from the steep topography, from the critical area you're going by, for all of these things. So it really, I do agree that in the bottom area, you really can have this, walkable atmosphere, this garden-style apartments. But when you come up to A2, that is not a walkable, as we found out tonight, no sidewalks, so it's not really intended for people, and it's only drivable, and so you're going to put 30 units with maybe 60, cars or more, and then you're going to have all of the other emergency vehicles as those are needed in the garbage trucks and all of that. And that's a very steep, very steep incline. And so by the time you take those 30 units, and it's one thing down below, because I think that really, and then look at the rest of the development. The rest of the development goes west. And so the only part to not have any transition between the neighborhoods is where it really gets in the grill, because you put them right on the end, and then as you go up to the, I think it's T8, T9, and the one over here, T7. Those three, there is that incline that goes up 15, 20 feet. So when you really look at that, it really does, if you allow that 3 stories to continue climbing up that mountain, you're awfully close and you're coming right down on us. And so that part really becomes, just not neighborly. It isn't as though we don't, assume there's going to be something there, and I have no problem with the overall development in A1. So not making any gripes or anything else, and I'm not trying to be a NIMBY or anything else. I think it's good to have a planned development. So I just think it needs to have an equal weighting for, we talk about everything that we've heard tonight, but it's more with a view toward what the apartment dwellers are going to see as opposed to the existing community and what they're going to see. And I think Ann has mentioned, you're really going to be looking at a block of fairly, massive buildings outside of your, rather than, a few homes maybe, or lower density, or having it all below will still make a lot of noise. So I think that whole concept of this walkable, all those kind of things, simply doesn't really hold any water, and I don't think that we've really addressed that. I mentioned to you in the letter all of the various areas that I think really don't integrate because of that, sharp departure, the large buildings, the 4 units, putting those 2 4 units right on the edge there, is really an abrupt thing, doesn't integrate with the community, blocks the views potentially. There may be views from the apartments, but there certainly won't be from the Issaquah Highlands. So a lot of issues that I think really come down. And what it kind of feels like is that, you know, it's just shoving it down our throats, and that's not a good feeling, you know. I mean, we want to, you know, if we could agree that the development's down on A1, we can go home tonight and, you know, I don't have to be coming to these meetings and you can go on with your project. If you want to continue to shove it down our throats, we're going to be seeing a lot of each other for a long time. So it's really your choice between the commission and the developers, you know. You know, and the area where the T9, T8, T7, it goes up and it also is treed, and so you're, you know, affecting the tree canopy as well as the habitat of the birds. The other area that really does concern me is because it's not, A2 is not this walkable, lovely little community. It's a driving, and so what you've done, they've got to get in their cars every time they want to really go somewhere, other than now you're going to unleash. Think about it. You're sitting there in your backyard, and all of a sudden you're unleashing maybe 120, I'm just saying 4 people in each apartment at 120 people, and you have this path, and what's the way they're going to, if they want to walk, they're going to come through, if you allow it through Laurel Court, which is a very challenged little alleyway right now, and there's barely space. I mean, the cars that go in there, a lot of times, you know, if you all of a sudden add all this foot traffic right there, it's really not going to be tenable. I mean, and it'll just, you know, cause chaos and really creates a nuisance for us. I mean, I think, so I think if you do have a path, it should go up through the trees and go onto a regular street rather than trying to sandwich in some overburdened area. But since that really isn't a pedestrian concourse in the A2, I think it becomes incongruent, I guess, is what I'm pointing out. So would really like to have it all in A1, and as a minimum, the other area that really needs to be addressed, I think, is the buffer in on the edge of the eastern line, because there really is nothing proposed. They show, I think, a 6-foot, perhaps, you know, shrubbery. Well, that's just to look nice from the apartment, so we put a smiley face on it. But the truth is that, you know, there's no fence line. There should be a 10 to 12 foot, just in terms of noise buffer, if nothing else, in terms of the shrubbery that's shown there. So I think that's all I have to really say. I just I hope that we can work together rather than, you know, slog it out on meeting after meeting that's not fruitful. I'm a very pragmatic person. I know my neighbors are too, and you know, we'd like to get the thing resolved and move on.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Freidenberg. Ying Fenderson.
Hi, my name is Yin. I live at 1885 10th Avenue, Northeast. I have the same concern as my neighbor already stated. You know, just my home is has such a tiny backyard. So the home built behind my house, you know, especially it's going to be rental homes. So I'm really concerned about the noise for the distance, you know, such a short distance between my home and those rental homes. And also, I know they're going to plant some trees. I don't know what kind of trees they're going to plant and how tall those trees are going to grow. So because our homes are all facing the north, already there's really not much light because we don't get much sun exposure. So if, you know, the building is so close to our homes, and also if the trees grow so tall, I feel like it's even going to make our homes even darker. So possibly if you can set, you know, some guidance to have some trees that's not going to grow like 30, 40 feet tall, like those pine trees. Another one I'm really concerned, just like as Anne stated, is really the erosion and the landsliding of my property, because I don't know how they're going to build a retaining wall and how far away from my fence, and who is going to be responsible for it. I think somebody mentioned about the maintenance. So if something happens, if we have some concerns or if we notice some issues, who are going to talk to about anything that could damage our property? So that's like a big concern for me. And possibly, again, just like everybody already requested, possibly if we can move those 30 townhomes to the A1 neighborhood, that would be ideal. I'm really thankful. I think another thing that I want to mention is about the appearance. Because it's rental property, I don't know what kind of, because there's patio, right? I don't know if people are going to put some thing on their patio. Because I know the buildings towards the east, we're going to see those patios because they're going to be much higher. So I don't know if there's any guidance to say, in Issaquah Highlands, I know the apartments, they have guidance to say you can't put like a really, random stuff or like, ugly stuff on your patio because it's going to affect the, appearance, right, for your neighbors. So I don't know if in that community, if they're going to say similar guidance. And the style, I'm really concerned about the color they're going to paint. I hope it's going to be neutral earth tone color that's, matching our, our house. And also, the buildings are going to get old. I don't know if how well the community owner is going to repaint the buildings and, to make sure. Because our homes are owned, right? So we as owners, we will do something ourselves. But because it's rental, I'm concerned that if they're not going to do anything for a long time, a period, just let it get old and ugly. So you're constantly looking at those, rental properties that's not taken care of, and so I wonder if there's any guidance for that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is it Jason Chan? Is that right?
Hi, my name is Jason Chan. I live in 976 North Ingoom Street. And thank you for Jerry to add the permits on the trash, covers on the trash area. I appreciate that. My main concern is the traffic. I don't know if the city has done any studies on the traffic to the two access points and entering points to the property on mainly on A1. If you're concerned making a U-turn on Highlands Drive and 9th, my main concern is, correct me if I'm wrong, the speed limit down the road is 35, correct? If the city is allowing that to be a U-turn point,
They're not. I'm sorry, they're not allowing U-turns.
Okay.
I just want to throw that out there.
And also my next point is that going to be a traffic light or just a walk?
It'll be a traffic light.
Okay.
Traffic signal.
There are two new traffic signals being added.
Okay. And then more close to the park and ride, is that going to be a traffic light as well, or? Okay. Then my concerns are solved.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chan. All right. Is there anybody else that would like to speak before I close the public comment portion for this evening? I'd like to note that in the next meeting, we will have another public comment section, so you can address any concerns you have from the follow-up from this meeting. But at this time, I will ask one last time, anybody else like to speak tonight? Okay, seeing nobody, we're going to close the public comment portion at 9:27. And we will move on to further open discussion. I want to start, if I could, real quick, just about A2. I guess I'm not entirely clear about, is it no sidewalks from that lower intersection on A1 all the way up? Is that what we're saying? No sidewalks all the way up?
A2?
Yeah.
A2 does have a sidewalk along the street on the south side of the sidewalk.
On the south side of the
The south
sidewalk,
side, it
front the homes.
Yes, it runs all the way up, and it
And it ends at the
and
T.
it turns on to the right part of the hammerhead.
Okay.
It does not serve the two
I see.
T7 and T9 on the north side.
I see. So you'd have,
You'll see that on the landscape plans L4. It's real clear, the sidewalk. That's sort of double line on
yeah, okay, I see that. Eric?
Yeah, I just want to, in support of what Jim said earlier about getting rid of them entirely, I don't see that that's a possibility. But, instead of 3-story townhomes, possibly shorter patio homes that are just 2 stories, and then take the loss of that story and add it to the area in A1. I just think that, there is a neighborhood situation here that there's a lot of complaints. I think that the developer could look into trying to move things around to shorten the height of, especially the ones at the very end there, T8, T9. I just think where there's a will, there's a way. You can expand into A1 and try to minimize A2 to some extent. There's just a lot of vocal, complaints to that extent. Even, I don't know, as far as the road, moving that south instead of north, I'm sure that's been looked at, but, even if that's a possibility where you can move the homes away from the neighborhood and have the road as a buffer, that would enhance the neighborhood too. So I just think there's a possibility to take a closer look and see how we can try to help resolve the issues that the neighbors are complaining about.
Thank you, Eric. And if I could respond real quick, I will remind the commission and the public that we had several discussions about this area, and while I agree that the developer could look at making some changes, we actually made a significant amount of changes and significant actual changes to building heights up in those areas to get to where we are now. So it may be slightly unfair to keep pushing the developer to go even further from what we actually allowed. So, and with the respect to property owners on both sides, nobody wants to be restricted beyond what is legally allowable. And so while it may not be your desire to have another building close to you, all throughout the Highlands and many other communities, it's allowed, and we may not like it. We may lose our view. I mean, I have a neighbor who won't cut down their weeds, which is, I've completely lost my view because of it. I can't do anything about it because it's their property. They can do what they want within reason. So I just want to remind people, we can't, I don't think we can legally request that they do anything there, because we have set a guideline through the development agreement, and I think we did make significant changes that really does benefit all those adjacent neighborhoods. Even though it's not perfect, it's a lot better than it was. Michael.
I respect that opinion. This kind of was one of my fears and why I think I did dissent when we agreed upon this situation where we did have houses abutting the neighbors here. So while you're entirely correct and we can't tell people to not build there, I think we can ask that they do follow the guidelines. And I think Mr. Radberg brought up a pretty good point there, that this neighborhood A2 is not necessarily in the spirit of the urban village there, with a number of the guidelines being well assimilated. It seems to be just a group of townhomes in that corner there. So while we can't say you can't build there, I think we can take, or should take, a better look at this and say, does it meet everything, the guidelines that we thought were appropriate for these urban village neighborhoods? And I'd love to see if we could take another look at that.
Fair points. Thank you. Ina.
God, do I get to disagree with Michael again? It's so much fun. I'm going to disagree again. Yeah, I know. It's just part of my thing. So about the townhomes in A2, it might be because they're so similar to the home that I like right now that I'm fond of them. I think they provide variety to the neighborhood. They will provide a diversity of neighbors to this community, and it has many elements that are positive. I don't think it's fair to say to the developer that, well, I think it's an afterthought and you just kind of stuck them up there. I think they're kind of cool. That said, the issues about building heights, Michael's point earlier about if it's one building but 4 units, where does the bottom, is something I'm looking forward to Lucy's response. That's an interesting perspective.
Absolutely.
And then I also wanted to ask Lucy an additional thing about those buildings especially, but even the ones maybe not so much on the east side, how the design standard or guideline, wherever it is, that says from buildings that are viewed from off-site and the requirements in design on that side of the buildings, because there are views from off-site to the back sides of the buildings in A2. So if we can assure compliance and design on that side, because that was important, and this is just the same way. And, oh, come on. I think that's all I want to do right now.
For clarification, the townhomes, are those also going to be rentals, or are those going to be sold? Rentals, okay. Okay, thank you. Jim?
Thank you. I agree with everyone. No, again, just point of clarification. What they're doing is all above board, and I do agree that there's really nothing we can do in terms of preventing them from doing this. But I'll tell you, this, to me, was the big fear I had with the entire development agreement, and the fact that the applicant was not going to be the developer, and that it's being sold to somebody else. And we had these discussions about, how were we going to make sure that the development agreement that we ironed out with the applicant was going to be then transferred over to whoever developed the different properties. So there's a part of me that Jerry and Lucy might not like this, but part of this, I think, kind of lands on your heads in terms of making sure that this is within the context of what we discussed, not only agreed to, but what we discussed and tried to get across in the development agreement. Because sometimes we'd be talking about one thing, and the verbiage might not be totally clarified, in which case it was really up to the city at that point to make sure that what we had discussed was getting across. So, just in terms of it, let's face it, it's A2 that the issues are at for a lot of people. So, yeah, the question is, does this really fit within the entire urban village? And if so, can anything be done to make sure that it is congruous and,
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to make a comment? Yes, Scott.
So thank you for those comments. I also agree. We had several discussions specific to A2 over the course of time with those very concerns. I guess as we look at A2 as it stands today, I definitely have a reservation in regards to accessibility for emergency vehicles and support vehicles, trash pickup, and so forth. As far as getting in and out of there, my concern and reservation is I would highly anticipate people are going to be parking on that street and in that hammerhead section. So when we talk about an opportunity for vehicle turnaround, how is that going to be feasible if people are parked in that space? So cautionary flag, something to be mindful of. Maybe there's an opportunity there that we can mitigate that. I'll continue to raise the flag, as I did over the months, as it relates to accessibility into this development off of Highlands Drive. I know that steps have been taken and a lot of assessment has been done, but I'm going to continue to raise the flag of concern around, just as Jeff called out, people running across that street because it's going to be easier to do that than to go to a signalized light. So will that happen? We'll find out soon enough, but anything that we can do to further mitigate or provide better opportunities and safety for those individuals is going to be key.
Thank you, Scott. If I could... Yeah, if I could comment on the emergency exit. I'm not concerned personally about the emergency exit because I know that we have to meet the standards there. I think the question comes down to, as Dan well knows, parking, signage, and enforcement. And my biggest issue with the city right now is enforcing our parking laws or regulations, signage, et cetera. And if we do it right, it's all for naught if nobody enforces it because people decide they're going to park there anyway. So I'm less concerned about fire access than I am about people ignoring what it is they're supposed to be doing. Carl.
Learn how to use a microphone again. I just want to make a comment about urban village and compatibility. If we moved everything from A2 down to A1, we'd go, it's a very homogeneous neighborhood. We haven't made it heterogeneous. It's not interesting. So, you know, we're looking for some of that diversity. We have owned homes next to rental homes all throughout Issaquah Highlands. So there's some compatibility there as far as the grade of the street. I live right next to a street, run up that street. It's steep, but cars and trucks and people and bikes go up and down it every single day. So it's not like we're scaling Mount Everest there. Let's keep it in context. We have those streets in Issaquah Highlands already. So yes, it's got its challenges, but this is part of an urban village in my view.
Thank you, Carl. Yes, Stephanie.
Just one thing I noticed as you were talking, is it true that there's no guest parking for all of the townhomes on A2?
I believe they have
I don't
guest
see any on the map.
parking on the driveways.
Okay, on the aprons?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'd like to state, first of all, thank you to the applicant, thank you to the staff, and thank you to the public for your comments. And then also, especially the commission, I think has been a really good discussion of a fairly tough site development permit because I think the result of the discussion shows that there is a diversity of views. I think, you know, if you were to take a poll, which I'm not going to do right now, A2 is good, A2 is not good. I'd like to do something different. I'd like to keep it the same. I think that's the whole point of this thing, and I think, you know, Carl made an excellent point about the diversity of that neighborhood, and I happen to agree with that point of view, but I also respect the other points of view of the commissioners as well as the public. I do believe we're doing so far doing the right thing within the context of the development agreement, and I think it's food for thought for the applicant to think about ways to potentially make some changes to appease the neighbors for the sake of relationship. However, you know, the process will play out as it does, and I think it's been a great discussion, so thank you very much. Okay, so we'll go ahead and just close this part of the discussion if everybody's cool with that, and go into very quickly talk about nominations for chair and vice chair, and we're not going to vote on it tonight, but we will on the next meeting, which is 2 weeks from tonight. Is that correct? June 4th? Correct?
Yep.
Okay. So, do you want to lead this, or you would like me to lead this?
I can lead this.
Please do.
So at this point, I would like to open nominations for the chair position of the Urban Village Development Commission. Would anyone like to nominate someone for chair?
I'd
Eric?
like to nominate Jeff for chair. Jeffrey Walker.
Okay. All right. Did I see Nina's hand up? Okay. Any other Scott? Okay. Let's not vote tonight. We're getting awful close. Okay. Okay. Oh, I love those feel-good moments. So, so since we seem to have unanimity, I'd like to now open up nominations for the vice chair position. Eric.
I'd like to nominate Carl Lee for vice chair.
Okay.
I'll second that nomination.
Any other nominations for vice chair? Okay.
Anyone other than Carl?
So only Carl.
Okay.
So Jerry's handing out a tentative schedule. You guys have been asking, and what we're looking at is a fairly packed schedule for the rest of the year. We gave you a few months off for good behavior. So we are in the third week of May, and this application we're assuming will be complete at the next meeting. The 2 meetings following that, the second one in June and the first one in July, we will be reviewing another polygon project on blocks 21 and 22 which is between Devco and Regency. So it's basically completes all of the projects between 10th Avenue and Highlands Drive. About to sneeze. Then on July 3rd, the third week of July, we're going to do something we've never done before.
It came anyway.
Yep. We're going to do a permit in one night. And this permit is for Block 10A, which is the little undeveloped parcel next to Z Home, across from the theater. It's 12 lots. It's so small, but it's they want, Ichijo wants it platted so that each of the townhomes is on an individual lot. So it will be a fairly abbreviated, there's already been an administrative site development permit approved. So in essence, we're kind of putting those conditions into a plat, and everything's fixed around it, relatively limited issues to look at. You'll find many things. Good point, Carl. Then August, because there's no time off for good behavior, is looking at the Providence Swedish development agreement. They are looking at purchasing what we fondly call the donut hole, which is the blocks between Blakely and Discovery, 7th and 8th Avenues, directly north of Swedish. The reason that we feel that we're in very preliminary discussions with them. So I'm not entirely certain of this, but I believe that what we're doing is using existing chapters of most recently adopted development agreements, so that it is not new material. No, it's a development agreement. We will not have a site plan. And no. And the desire on their part is that the development agreement expires, or the build-out period expires in about 5 years. And they believe it'll take them closer to 10 years, I think, to develop a site plan and build it out. And they need some predictability as to their entitlement. And then in the fall, it appears that there will be 3 permits, 3 site development permits. One for blocks 25 through 27, which is where Proliance, so just to the east of Swedish, the blocks all the way there to Discovery. Devco has an option on those and are proposing 200 units. Then we just today began talking to the master developer of Talus about Parcel 9, which is, if you take Talus Drive up until it tees, Talus Drive, all the way up to where it tees at Shangri-La, the property directly in front of you is Parcel 9. So they're looking at a residential project on that property. And then finally Bellevue College, which we think will be submitted in the next month or 2.
Will that be phased?
Okay.
Bellevue College?
Yeah. Any comments, questions before we adjourn? Yes, Scott? Well, yeah, yes, I think we're always interested in that. There's a lot of information coming out on the Facebook page and so forth. A lot of things have been announced. So if you're not a member, if you don't, go look for the Facebook page. It's got great information, pictures, all kinds of things.
What's it called, Jeff? Do you know?
Issaquah Highlands. Yeah. Yeah. I can't name them all, but Mod Pizza was just announced. The Cupcake Place was announced. There's a lot of stuff happening. The movie theater's almost done. It's happening. We might have to do a field trip as a group.
It has been, I think we've permitted all the buildings and almost all the landscape, I think, is permitted too.
Yeah.
So it's been a very busy 6
Have you
months
been
of
up there, Ben?
permitting.
Sorry? Yeah. Okay. Anything else? All right, let's go ahead and adjourn this at 9:47, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Thanks very much, and thanks for your support.